One day, the sky turned blood red, opening portals to another world. Unknown monsters began to enter through these gates, wreaking havoc on the peaceful lives of people. In response to the threat, beings capable of resisting these creatures appeared and entered our world as well. They were called saints. And one day, something happened that no one expected. A message of greetings from another world came to the residents' phones. These beings had been preparing since the founding of Korea, which they now faced, and asked people not to go outside under any circumstances. The message said that they should not open doors or leave their places because the saints would soon come to their aid. After some time in this rhythm of chaos and destruction, some people began to acquire superpowers. They awakened their powers and could use them against demons, having the same abilities as the saints. The life expectancy of these people became comparable to that of monsters, but this was only the beginning. The warriors continuously destroyed monsters, defending their homeland and place of residence. This was the beginning of a world where people could wield great power. The sources of this power were determined for those who sought to become saints. The spiritual body determined whether a person was the basis of a saint. It was divided into three main categories. The first is the heavenly body, which allows one to use the powers of heaven and earth. The second category is the mundane body, which allows one to possess one of the five elements: fire, water, earth, wood, or metal, which formed everything that exists on earth. The third category is the human body, which allows you to use the energy of the sun and moon, that is, yin-yang. However, there was an exceptional body that could not be attributed to any of these categories. It was beyond understanding. A powerful explosion sounded in the city that looked like a slum. Everything shook and caught fire. The street was collapsing right before our eyes. Cars were flying up, being thrown around with great force. It was a winged green monster that craved destruction. It was destroying everything in its path, and its demonic power was incredible. People were running away from it. Some could not stand it and fell, and some died on the spot from the debris. But the monster was not going to stop flapping its wings. It covered the entire neighborhood, terrifying the city slums. Suddenly, someone distracted the monster with his presence, and even this animal took notice. Using an elixir from the fog, a man with a glowing aura emerges. In his mouth, he has a nicotine cigarette, which acted as a hyperstimulant of the central nervous system. He activated the secretion of dopamine and walked straight to the monster with a stick in his hands. The adrenaline secretion was exceeding the norm, and this man, in great shape, radiated a completely different energy. Looking at the huge monster, he realized that he would have to deal with this monster. The monster, seeing that he was not afraid, opened his wide mouth and screamed for the whole neighborhood. But it didn't make any impression on our hero. He didn't care about the birds' cries. Without hesitation, he jumped forward to destroy the villain. Even though the monster was twice his size, he flew upwards holding his weapon. He raced straight for the head of this devilish creature, radiating energy from his entire body. The moment he reached the monster, he struck it in the face with his stick, and the creature flew away from the powerful blow. The miserable animal smashes the building next to it with its head from the blow of the young, strong man. But it was not the end. He was going to destroy this horrible creature that had deprived his city of peace. This guy's body did not belong to any of the body types that existed. His element was a disaster that could not be categorized. His technique was the embodiment of chaos, and his body was a weapon of mass destruction. No one could fully understand this guy's abilities because they were incomprehensible and unpredictable. His body type was called abnormal, and he could do incredible things with it. After the blow, everything was filled with the monster's blood. The boy managed to destroy this creature, which was extremely strong. There were people who brought peace through their spiritual bodies, but there were also those who brought chaos and discord. The saints tried to control ordinary people, and then there was a guy with a wrong body that did not fit into any categories. He was mysteriously walking on the roof of one of the buildings. After the battle was over, he finished his cigarette. His abilities allowed him to control chemicals that helped him to reveal the full potential of his powers. Looking at the miserable animal, the young man realized that this creature was a messenger of the gods with higher power. He did not understand why the saints left such dangerous monsters alone. This guy's name was Hanil, and he was a disaster with the power of a wrong body. These creatures were being insolent, and Hanil would do everything to make them pay for their behavior. The guy running on the rooftops was an overgrown monster using his powers. He fought against the saints, knew all the ways to activate his superpowers, and people created legends by looking at him. The city's newspapers and media space were filled with thousands of reports about this incredible guy, and everyone was happy that this damn bird had finally been destroyed. He was able to save many people by his actions, doing what the government could not do. He quickly became a sensation in the information space because he was completely different from other saints. It was a beautiful summer day, and work at the factory was over. The warehouse workers were rushing home to see their families and children. One of the workers opened a bottle of syrup after work. At the time, his colleagues complained of body pain and hard work. The guy took the syrup, replenishing his body with energy. He thanked his colleague for his good work but said he had to go. His colleagues wanted to keep him to have lunch together, but he was in a hurry because of some urgent business. His colleagues wondered where he got so much energy from. Maybe he was taking vitamins, one suggested. But no one knew for sure if he was taking them or if vitamins could have such an effect. Perhaps he has ginseng at home, which is used as a tonic. The young man was walking home after work knowing full well that the vitamins were working very well for him. It was Park Hanil. He was 22 years old, and the vitamins were having an amazing effect on him. Not long before, he had learned about his ability after he first tried the nutritional supplements a co-worker gave him. After a hard day's work, his fatigue disappeared like a charm after taking the vitamins. He felt great. Omega-3s provided incredible concentration and a clear mind. Walking home, he realized that no matter how hard he worked, he felt good. Getting off the bus, he walked to his house. Looking at his phone, he did not expect a girl who was passing by to offer him a cup of coffee. Of course, he paid attention to this strange girl because no one had ever offered him one before. She kindly asked him to meet her, and she spoke as if she had never said this to anyone before. She asked for his phone number, just like in the movies, and the guy was touched by this. However, he didn't fully understand why she was paying attention to him. The girl said that he had a wonderful aura, and if he was free, they could talk about Tao. But after these words, the guy realized what was going on. It was propaganda for a cult that is now banned in Korea. He turned away from the girl and wanted to run away. She ran after him, trying to explain that she was not a bad person. Her name was Han Yuhi, and she represented a certain society. But it looked like nonsense to him, and he started running away so that she wouldn't catch up with him. Having accelerated, he managed to get away from her. He was already tired of these proposals from religious fanatics. It was hard to believe that such people existed at all. These cults, saints, and all because of his father. His father was an ordinary man, but one day he made an important decision, which he explained to his wife. He created a medicine that had nothing to do with saints and had an amazing effect. He quit his job and moved in with his parents. Later, he started taking mixtures of medicines and herbs with different ingredients. After that, he was hospitalized several times because of severe pain. One day he went to the forest, leaving a letter saying that he would return when his energy was restored. This happened 20 years ago, when the boy was just a child. He was 2 years old. It was a very long time ago, and it was hard for him to remember it all. He was worried about his father's sudden departure. In those moments, his father was taking nutritional supplements, just like him, and not strange medications, as some people thought. He went to one of the pharmacies, took the necessary nutritional supplement, and, when he went outside, noticed that the sky was overcast. These clouds didn't look like the usual rain or bad weather, and people started to pay attention to them, taking pictures with their phones. A huge circle began to form over the city, worrying everyone. It seemed to be some kind of portal to another world. The guy didn't see it when he entered the store. It didn't look like a movie set, it looked more like the arrival of a spaceship. Soon after, a powerful shock came from this circle, which alarmed everyone on the spot. It was like an earthquake happening right now, and people started falling off their feet. The ground in the city began to crack, and some claws began to emerge from the soil. Soon, a monstrous creature of an incomprehensible shape began to crawl out of the broken soil. It looked like a cross between a devil and an orc. It was terrifying and carried a weapon. Looking at this creature, it was clear that we had to run away, because it was clearly not friendly. But why should our hero run away right now? At the moment of the attack of fear, he felt his heart start to beat much harder. When he took the elixir, his body began to take on a completely different shape, and his aura began to glow with different colors. He had taken a substance that acted like caffeine and sugar, and his body played with new colors, but the orc continued to attack. At the moment when the monster swung his mace at him, the boy did nothing but feel a surge of energy. The stimulation of the nerve endings and the nervous system intensified, and at the moment when the orc's mace was above his head, he felt that the orc may have slowed down, but incredible energy began to emanate from its eyes. He even thought that he was seeing everything in slow motion. If this is true, what is happening? At this point, he stands still and his coffee falls to the ground. And it's not just falling, it's falling slowly, at a very slow speed. The guy realizes that perhaps he has such a strong force. But where did it come from? Perhaps it was the coffee or some vitamins. Given that the orc has slowed down, perhaps he can escape. Chaos reigns around. The guy sees that these monsters have overrun the city and are killing people on the streets. Having received this energy, he can run away from these animals because now he has a chance. But instead of running away, he decides to kick that damn orc. Having received a strong blow to the stomach, the guy did not even expect to be able to knock the orc down. The mace of this terrible monster fell out of his hands and fell to the ground. One might have thought that the orc was defeated, but it was not so simple. The boy's excitement and strength did not stop growing, and he decided that now he had to attack. The orc did not even expect to meet such resistance on these streets. He just wanted to kill this guy. They rushed at each other with the aim of destroying each other. But who would get there first? In a few seconds, they were almost at the same level near the mace. The first to grab the mace was the boy, holding it tightly. He raised it above him, although it was not easy to swing, and he hit the huge orc in the face to make him realize who was in charge. Looking at how the orc fell down and did not move anymore, the boy felt his strength and realized that he was stronger than he expected. But as he looked around, he noticed that things were not so simple. He was being surrounded from different sides. Several orcs, about 4 to 6, began to run from different directions trying to avenge their brother. Holding the mace in his hands, he realizes that he will have to try very hard. With this energy, he realizes that he is about to show the orcs where the crayfish hibernate. Swinging his mace, he first struck an orc flying at him from a height with his huge body. But this fat orc didn't scare him. He knocked him out with a punch to the face so that his teeth flew in different directions. After a few clever blows, the other orcs also began to fall to the ground, and the boy ran forward, chopping off their stupid heads. The street was full of orcs, and even though he cut down one, 10 would take its place. Despite this, he couldn't stop. He had to go all the way. He destroyed the orcs right on their territory, knocking the hell out of them. They didn't even expect such resistance. When he took a swing at one of the main orcs, he realized that it was the last orc in this quarter. The block was surrounded by orcs, but this last one stood between him and victory. He had to try very hard to knock out the last enemy, get out of the battle and stay alive. He hopes that it's over, and he doesn't fully understand what happened at all. Looking at the chaos in the world, he realizes that the bunch of orcs he defeated does not mean the end, because an orc came out of the neighborhood, much stronger than all the previous ones. It was a huge demon-like orc with a powerful mace, looking directly at the boy, asking a silent question. What the hell is this? Its huge teeth looked like it could chew through a car without paying attention to the boy. The boy thought about fighting him, but given his strength, he doubted whether he was weaker than he looked. The orc didn't wait long and started attacking, which made the boy's face turn pale. A huge mace flew at his head, leaving him no chance to dodge. The great energy that filled him disappeared, and at the last moment he saw a large mace flying straight at his head, and this could only mean one thing: death. Several store employees hid from the chaos. The orcs not only attacked people, but also fought among themselves. One of the guys was looking at the monsters and couldn't imagine what would happen if one of them broke in. The girl was scared, but they didn't know what to do. When they wanted to close the door, Puck flew right at them with a strong blow. He smashed the store window and hit one of them, so they both flew away. Landing on the shelf and on the floor, the goods were scattered all over the room. But that wasn't the end. The monster was coming for the guy he had just hit with his mace. The monster roared with tension and wanted to destroy all the people. It was Bonds, the monster boss. Once inside, the monster looked around. The boy on the ground was begging for mercy. The boy was screaming for salvation, tears rolling down his face, but the monster stretched out his big hand to kill him. Park lit a cigarette at that moment, and his body was under the influence of the elixir. He threw the lighter on the ground, and it was as if a lot of energy appeared in his body. The guy abruptly got off the ground and ran towards the monster that was mocking his colleague. With a strong kick, the guy hits the monster's head. The force of the kick was just incredible. The huge orc breaks through the shop window and flies forward like a loser. Hitting the neighboring wall, he bruised himself quite badly, but the fight was not over. Even though the monster flew many meters and punched a big hole in the neighboring house, the guy was not going to leave or let it live. He confidently approaches the orc. Nicotine penetrates his body. He takes another drag to feel its effects. The system informs him that the nervous system is being stimulated and energy is being restored right now, and the guy is acquiring a new aura. As he finishes his cigarette, looking at the orc, he invites him to take part in the second round. The moment the cigarette falls to the ground, it's as if the start button is being pressed. This shows the guy that he needs to run forward to reach new heights. With a strong blow that swept through the orc, he hits him right in the head so that the orc felt all the rage on his body. The guy is not going to stop and will finish the job. This huge monster has invaded his world and is giving people no peace. But after a few blows, the orc finally regained consciousness. Having gained strength, he grabbed the boy and wanted to destroy him with his claws. But our hero successfully dodged the attack. A strong punch on the ground almost broke the asphalt, but did not hit the guy. Our hero looks at the orc and realizes that this creature is filled with a lot of energy and is not going to give up. One more blow to the head of this monster will not hurt him. After this blow, one of the orc's horns broke off and he fell down, losing consciousness for a second. When the orc opened his eyes, he saw Puck standing over him. Puck was going to smash his head to show his power to this creature. He pressed the orc's head to the asphalt and destroyed the cursed creature. The orc was defeated and lay unconscious, destroyed by the protagonist, who was very tired from this battle. After catching his breath after the attack, he noticed that it was a significant physical strain on his body, but he also felt the effects of cigarettes. Looking back at what was happening, he hoped his mom was okay. But he let his guard down and the orc rose from the asphalt debris. The orc grabbed the boy by the shoulder, despite his injuries. He grabbed the boy's head and began to press it into the asphalt. At that moment, Pa could not even move, feeling that his life was ending. The orc not only pressed him into the asphalt, but also tried to finish off the one who wanted to destroy him with his left hand. The orc's powerful punch hit our hero's head, and it seemed that it would destroy him. But the orc was not expecting it. He looked at what happened in amazement. The guy blocked his punch with one hand. He not only stopped the orc, but also looked him in the eye, telling him not to move. The guy's left hand hit the orc right in the stomach, knocking the shit out of him. The guy wanted only one thing, for this vile creature to finally die. But this lousy orc could not die. But after this blow, he had no chance. The boy threw him aside and stood for a moment, thinking. He threw the orc away from him to lie down elsewhere, because it was uncomfortable for both of them to lie on the asphalt together. Incredible fatigue gripped his body. He couldn't even move a finger. But when everything quieted down, he heard screams from far away. People were screaming for help because many orcs were attacking them. Incredible creatures like mountains had fallen on their place, and something had to be done about it. Rising up from the asphalt, Park realizes that he doesn't have enough energy. He wonders where these cursed creatures came from and why they are attacking civilians in such numbers. These monsters bothered him deeply, especially the fact that their quiet life cycle had come to an end, no matter how much it pained him. No matter how much he wanted to stop it, the orcs still ran and attacked people. They were grabbing people on the roads, strangling them, taking their lives, and when the guy saw it, the moment when one of the men was being attacked by a cruel orc and wanted to kill him, a white silhouette appeared in the sky, flying towards the scene. It was something like a lady who landed smoothly as if she was floating in the air. She slowly spun through the airspace as she stepped onto the tarmac and headed toward the scene. Taking the card in her hands, she filled it with her energy. She threw the card like a bullet, which flew at high speed, leaving a trail of this power behind. The incredible monsters that were crawling out of the ground saw the card flying towards their lair. The card was surrounded by an energy layer and carried great power. It bifurcated, creating an energy circle. It exploded with energy, and it fried the orcs who were within the radius of this technique. The orcs were not just destroyed, they disintegrated into small pieces and disappeared from that place. This applied to all the orcs nearby, who were incredibly destroyed. Our hero just looked at her, not understanding how it happened. This woman killed all the orcs with one blow, and it was just incredible to him. But who is she and what is she doing here? She walked right up to him and looked at him. The boy was impressed, but he did not understand why she came to him at that moment. The girl watched him and was amazed that he was able to defeat one of the monsters on his own without any training. She realized that the guy was no ordinary guy and asked him who he was. But what could an ordinary warehouse worker who had just miraculously managed to escape such an incredible attack say? The girl looked at him, interested in his abilities. She asked for his hand, but Park didn't understand what abilities she was talking about, because he was just fighting for his life. Using her power, the girl made his arm straighten in her direction on its own. She stared at his arm, trying to understand what kind of abilities he had. At first, she didn't understand what secrets he was hiding, but she was amazed to see that he had neither a celestial nor a human body. The only explanation she could give was that he had the wrong body. She felt sorry for the boy, but she couldn't let a disaster roam the city, so she decided to get rid of him immediately. She pointed her hand and began to accumulate energy to destroy him. But before she could do so, the guy looked at her hand and began to refuse. He thanked her for her help, although he did not realize the danger he was in. He did not know how to thank this woman for saving him from a painful death. But the woman was doing something incomprehensible, creating an energy layer. She accumulated the energy layer in her hand, considering these conversations a waste of time. With her index finger, she pushed the energy ball toward Park. He caught the energy ball with his mouth, which flew right in. He swallowed it, as if it were something heavy and uncomfortable in his body. He felt bitter and heavy from what she had given him. At that moment, his body began to shake with electricity as if he had been electrocuted. When he asked what it was and why he felt so bad, the girl only replied that it was a medicine to dull his power source. Although this technique is usually used on demons who cannot be controlled, it was the only way to save Park's life, in her opinion. His unstable abilities could destroy both his life and the lives around him, although he might be hurt at the moment, but it would be better. At this point, the woman turned away from Park with the thought that if fate wills it, they will meet again in the future, and left him. When asked to wait and explain what had happened, the woman said nothing. The guy fell on the cracked asphalt, unable to catch his breath after this toxic attack. What the hell did she do? What kind of medication did she give him? And what did she mean when she said he had the wrong body? These questions haunted him. But why did she emphasize that his abilities were unusual? This gave the boy a chance to think, and he decided to pull himself together. He was laughing at the whole performance and these mysterious phrases, and he stood up on one leg. If it wasn't for his abilities, he would have remained on the ground. Despite all the scattered drugs around him, he couldn't stop himself and picked up a bottle of vitamins that was lying nearby. He unscrewed the cap with his teeth and took the medicine. After drinking the liquid, he felt relieved because he had been using this substance to survive. The preparation contained alder and romanium trees, which helped his liver function, and soon his body began to detoxify. After a while, he collected a large number of such drugs. He brought them home and drank one jar after another. Time after time, he opened and drank these drinks. He could not even think that hangover drinks would work so well. However, looking at his body after the brutal fight, he doesn't feel great. But remembering the girl's words about the disaster, he realized that the medicine she gave him had clearly had some effect on him. Looking at his room, surrounded by all this negativity, he realizes that he needs to get out of here and go to his mom to check on her. But as he leaves the room and looks at his phone, he is struck with terror. He received an urgent warning on his cell phone, saying that other monsters were approaching. When he looked closer at the text of the alert, he was shocked. The Department of Disaster Management was telling him to stay home and avoid going outside, and a link to download an app was provided. But what were these 2-star special events he saw on the App Store? It was clear that the app was fairly new, the design was very poor. If it's an emergency alert, it's unlikely to be scammers. Soon, the guy starts scanning his ID in the app. The message "Authentication Complete" appeared, and he was redirected to the main page of the app. Everything around him began to move and take on new colors. He did not understand what kind of world was in front of him. He clutched his heart, not understanding why it was beating so hard. What kind of medicine had he taken? Reaching for one of the energy drinks, he drinks it in one gulp and doesn't even notice that a system window flies in front of him. Unintelligible symbols whirl around in front of him, but he doesn't pay attention to them. Although he started to feel better after drinking the energy drink, it did not mean a complete recovery. Finally, he noticed a window illuminated above him, but he did not understand what it was. This yellow window reported the results of Park Hanil's test. The guy was confused even by the name. What kind of results are these? But his curiosity was much stronger. And what else to do during the apocalypse but read such an interesting manga story? So subscribe to the channel and continue watching this masterpiece. The blue sphere we see on the screen is called the Blue Nothing, and it looks like a tree. In its core, you can find water containing blue energy. Among all the medicines containing energy, this is one of the best in this world. But what does this have to do with Park Hanil's tests? The young man watched this message in surprise, wanting to know more. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his stomach that did not let him rest. He fell to the floor and began to vomit as the chemical, empty blue energy, entered his body. Empty blue energy was one of the ingredients in the medicine Hanil had taken. The hangover drinks neutralized the poisonous effects of the medicine, but the effect of the blue energy remained. Hanil's body had an interesting reaction. His body was very hot from the toxic effect, and he was holding his chest. All this time he felt lousy, and he waited for the fever to subside. He felt as if he had been poisoned, but it was unclear what had affected him so much. Nevertheless, he needed to get through it somehow, and the guy started moving around the room to find a comfortable place. Soon he laid down, and it was just wonderful. He crossed his arms, sitting like a monk in the lotus position. Hanil remembered this posture he had seen in martial arts movies when people practiced this kind of meditation. After sitting like that for 5 minutes, he noticed that the position was incredibly comfortable. To help his fever go down, he decided to sit like this until he felt better. Looking at the statistics in front of his eyes, he saw that his body was not right, but the system window showed that everything was fine. The results showed that his spiritual body was created for him. The main feature was that the tree nourished his body with energy. The woman he met during the battle with the orcs gave him medicine that was unstable. Realizing the peculiarity of his body, he wondered, What does it mean that the tree nourishes him with energy? Soon, the poison finally wore off, and the boy felt relieved. Probably the changes in the ingredients occurred while he was analyzing this information. What a relief it was for Hanil. He would have died if his body had been wrong. Soon, a second blue window began to materialize to his left. He saw the Korean president addressing the nation. The president wanted to tell the pure truth to his people and immediately address them. He announced that certain measures had been decided to be taken for the safety of everyone. If you go into a detailed description of this world, 10,000 years ago, the world was a much more exciting place than it is now. Creatures called monsters roamed the earth freely and ruled it. While other creatures from different galaxies flocked to their world, humans were on the verge of survival. People were being killed and discarded like expendable material. But in the midst of the chaos, a select few were given unexpected powers. A special power that no one had ever possessed before gave them a long life and the ability to cope with strong monsters. People rose to the level of monsters, and this was the beginning of a new world where everyone could wield great power. Later, these people were called saints. At the moment when it was necessary to close the gates to heaven, the saints sacrificed their lives. They did this so that people could prosper in this world, opening up a brighter future for them through their sacrifices. The saints were considered myths and legends. Their stories passed down from generation to generation. No one knows if this is true, but this is what history has said until now. The president announced that all the saints would patrol in their assigned areas, protecting civilians. These people have been tested for their abilities and have the right to use force if necessary. The president's speech ended, but the boy began to see a lot of interesting information in front of him. Clicking on the information in front of him, he realized that it was about his body skills and abilities. Soon, numerous windows hanging in the air opened in front of him. All of this information made up the skills he had. Looking at the statistics, he saw that his abilities were unique. He had upper, middle, and lower cores that made up his core strength. He could feel warmth in these places because he was sitting in a posture that allowed energy to circulate. After years of training, you can feel warmth in at least one of these three places. As soon as all 3 points start to warm up, you can start training with the Earth method. The Earth method refers to breathing techniques. The information made the guy realize that he needed to breathe in this pose. He didn't catch himself thinking that yesterday he didn't believe in religion, but today he was practicing the holy breath technique. Concentrating on the breathing technique, he began this practice. He tried to repeat it over and over again, forcing his lungs to fill and exhale air. When he opened his eyes, he realized that it was easier than he thought. He wanted to see how his body reacted to it. Even if he has a spiritual body, it takes time to feel the warmth in these points. For some people, it can take as long as a month or even years, depending on their talent. With enough training and practice, he will be able to reach this state, even if it doesn't happen right away. At that moment, Hanil took the first step toward becoming a new kind of saint. When he opened his eyes, he could not believe it had happened. He was covered with trees and his room was filled with grasses and tree roots. Branches started coming out of all the cracks. The jars were braided with roots, and it all happened in a second for him. He was so engrossed in the breathing practice that he didn't even notice how much time he spent in this state, and everything overgrew. After leaving his room and shaking off the roots, he wanted to look at his phone, but the battery was dead. Turning his head 360 degrees, he tried to find a clock nearby. Noticing a clock on the wall, he looked at the month and time. Shocked to see the date, he couldn't believe it that he had been in this state for almost 100 days. He had started meditating about 100 days ago, and he was just now coming out of his meditative state. During this period of time, grass grew in the room. But despite this, something had to be done, and Park took a bath. Fortunately, it at least worked. However, his condition was rather strange. After such a long time in meditation, he did not feel exhausted or hungry. Even his body hadn't lost weight, and his muscles hadn't disappeared, despite the long period of inactivity. The phone was connected to the power bank, and of course, in 100 days it should be fully charged. Now he could find out what had happened in the world during this period of time. When he looked outside, he saw a very interesting phenomenon. There was a big seal hanging over the city, like a huge dome-shaped barrier, and periodically there were funnels from which monsters came out. This area was very dangerous, and he stayed here because he could not evacuate. Looking out the window again, he saw the silhouette of a monster. The ground was shaking as this monster roamed around the city. It was huge. The sounds and screams of monsters filled the city, and it was clear that it was very dangerous to be here. The guy continued to look around and could not believe his eyes. What the hell? Looking down, he realized that there was not just one monster surrounding him. A huge number of monsters were down there, thirsting for blood. They were everywhere, both above and below. and they had terrifying shapes. Looking at all this, Park realized that he had to get out of here quickly. But it wasn't that simple. No one was going to evacuate him. Moreover, there was no signal, and the only way to communicate was not working. When he lowered his temperature for breathing techniques, he lived 100 days in the lotus position. Although he had guessed that this was a special breathing technique, he didn't realize it. When he opened the ability window of his unique body, he saw a message that he was not connected to the network and would not receive the necessary functions. He started flipping through the tree-lined room looking for information he couldn't find. The only thing he could see at that moment was his profile. But something changed in his profile, and 2 other copies of the mascot were added. Curiosity got the better of him, and he clicked on this information. The information said that the copies of the mascot were useful, and that mascots were given out depending on the supporters and rank. 9 ranks of contract space magic. Attach the talisman to your finger and focus on a point on the top of your finger using your breath. After reading this, the guy thought it was very easy. But when he tried it, he realized that it wasn't that easy. At first, nothing much happened to impress him. When he got out of bed, he didn't feel much different. But when he tapped his foot on the floor, something did start to circulate. Suddenly, he began to move at the speed of light and hit the wall without realizing it. Falling down from a strong impact, the guy realized that the magic of contract space magic was actually real. Holding his nose, he realized that he still had a lot to learn. An interesting card allowed weight transfer, which gave him a chance to move much heavier objects. The next card provided ease of use in combat, allowing you to react quickly, like a flash. After analyzing this information, the guy decided to test everything on the roof. The only problem was that the monsters could see. Find out more information to be able to push off and escape from this cursed place. Earlier, he had copied the breathing technique in one of the windows, and curiosity got the better of him. He decided to take a closer look. After reading about the training of the technique, which lasts from 1 to 10 stars, he learned that after the 5th star, he could use the ability of the tree. The more tree energy and experience, the higher the level. However, he would need to spend at least 10 years per star, which looked very ridiculous. He scratched his head, realizing that waiting 10 years before he could use that star would mean breathing for the rest of his life until he died. But he already had a few stars to start with. He began to accumulate energy and could measure his level. To do this, he had to release energy into both hands and stretch out his left arm. The instruction was quite clear. When he stretched out his left arm, he began to feel the energy. The number of rings on his arm corresponded to his level. Park stared at his hand, which began to glow with green energy. But as he was enthusiastically practicing his technique, something disturbed him. An unworthy creature had invaded the apartment and was walking around the floors. But why at this very moment? Monsters had invaded his room and a large tiger was walking on the same floor as our hero. The monster was incredibly large. Its eyes glowed with cruelty. It was in hunting mode. There was no time to think. He had to find something quickly, and he began to search more actively. But miraculously, it did happen. The guy found what he had been looking for so long. However, the roar of the monster began to come out of the hole in the wall, and it noticed the boy. With great speed, the monster began to run at him, having noticed him with just a glance. The monster grabbed the boy by his left shoulder with its claws and began to strangle him as if he were a toy. The boy could feel blood running down his face because of this bite. It seemed that nothing would help him escape from this evil monster, which had longed for this tidbit in a deserted place. But in China, there was a skill called the absorption method, which took the monster's life force at the moment of contact. The guy felt that when he put his hand on the monster, he had something similar to this skill. Energy began to accumulate in his right hand, and he touched the monster with it, hoping it would help. He activated the planting sprout art. He was able to strike the monster and disconnect its mouth from his shoulder. Throwing the cursed creature aside so that it would no longer gnaw at him, he felt powerful. His body was filled with a green aura, and he felt incredible power. He was enveloped in an energetic state that allowed him to do incredible things, but he did not understand what had happened to him. Although the wound on his shoulder was serious, he survived thanks to a useful skill. But suddenly the power in his eyes began to fill his body, and he felt like he was in another world. Utilizing the nutrients, he felt a surge of energy and even went down on one knee to withstand the strain. His energy devoured the monster. By forming useful elements, it stabilized muscles, improved blood formation, and increased the production of red blood cells. After absorbing the monster's energy, something incredible began to happen around him. The guy began to glow with a completely different aura, and the power he received from nowhere began to fill the entire room. Looking at his hand, he could not understand what was happening to his body. He felt a huge amount of energy in his body that he had never had before. His nutrients were restored, and he took the life of that monster, which is why they were restored. Feeling the power in his hands, he realized that it would be enough to last him through the use of the winding wind. An interesting fact. He noticed that grass and trees began to grow from the monster's body where it had been lying. To take a closer look, the guy got closer and couldn't believe how these sprouts could appear on the monster's body. They hadn't been there before. He pulled out the sprouts and put them in his suitcase, thinking that they might be useful in the future. He can only use a sprout once per enemy. If he doesn't have time to absorb the monster's energy before destroying them, it's best to avoid encounters with a large number of enemies. Looking at the statistics, he realizes that he needs to hold out until the rescue team arrives. Judging by the fact that he has a trick up his sleeve, he will have to use it. Soon, another hungry creature enters the room, eager to destroy our hero. It attacks Puck and tries to tear him apart, its eyes glowing with incredible energy. Looking stern, it also screams, opening its mouth. The boy catches the bite of this creature with his elbow, which is trying to tear him apart. But the boy's arm, like armor, does not allow him to bite it. Using the art of layering, the boy swings his arm, which is glowing with green light, to strike the villain. His eyes glow with a green aura, and his desire for the bastard to let go of his hand grows. A powerful punch knocks all the stupidity out of this monster. There was no time to relax. He had to run forward. He runs away from the monster and rushes on. He needs to move faster to call an ambulance, using the twisting world and tearing forward. But the whole building is crawling with these creatures, just waiting for someone to get in their way. Looking at this unbelievable, horrific scenario, the guy can't believe that there is no end to them. He begins to beat these monsters one by one, but they attack from different directions like crazy. Although the boy's strength gives him the opportunity to fight, one of the creatures grabs his leg. But Park still fights it off and escapes from all the bites. One monster is replaced by 3 or 4 more, and they are incredibly difficult to fight. He ran up the stairs, thinking that the number of monsters seemed endless. A little more, and he reaches the roof, which he tried so hard to get to. Kicking the door with his foot, he finally makes it to the roof. Everything is covered in dust, and he is coughing from fatigue and dust. But the picture he saw on the roof was simply incredible. There was an incredibly large monster standing in front of him, with its hand resting on the roof. Looking at this ugly creature, the guy did not know what to do with this freak who was looking directly at him with his 3 eyes. Monsters were waiting for him below. Monsters were waiting for him on the street. It could drive him crazy. However, looking at these freaks, the guy realizes that he has all or nothing left. Gathering all his will into a fist, he decides to take on these villains. Activating the twisting world, he rushes forward and the power begins to work. Taking the card in his hand, he materializes it above him, illuminating everyone around him, and the monsters are exposed to the brightness of the light. This light begins to blind the creatures and harm them. A huge stream of light rises high up, visible at a great distance, blinding everything around. Soon, all these monsters ran away from the light and the guy sat down to take a break. After a while, he heard a human voice telling him that he was coming out right now, and he had hope that it was a rescue team. Running forward, the guy shouted that he was here and ready to be rescued, but he saw a man flying in the air. This man had a curious aura and levitated in the air, flying towards him. He wondered why the guy was lounging around by himself in this place, why he didn't have a talisman to fly or jump. He was a fire towist. The guy admitted that he had nothing. He had only received 3 talismans at the beginning. The flying towist, looking at him, wanted to remind him that this was not the best place to make excuses, and held out his hand for him to take. A monster was approaching the flying towist, but when the boy pointed it out, the towist didn't even show any emotion. The monster decided to grab the flying towist with its powerful claws the moment he turned. But the towist was tired of all this, and he was not even confused by such an unexpected blow. He began to fill his hand with energy, which surrounded it with flying balls. These balls circled his hand like armor, accumulating energy. A powerful blow from 1,000 of these balls hit the monster right in the face, causing it to collapse. At that moment, the creature flew to the side and began to fall apart. The Taoist looked at Park and asked him not to keep him waiting, to quickly extend his hand. It was clear that our hero had no choice. He had to act immediately. The Taoist wrapped his arms around the boy like a protective dome, lifting him up. The Taoist wondered how people like him could wander in this zone and why he did not value his life. But he did not have to answer because the Taoist was not interested or did not need to know. Our hero, flying with him, thanked him for saving him from death. Soon they flew through the protective barrier and the guy found himself in a slightly easier environment. Once inside the protective zone, his phone finally started to pick up a signal. Opening his messenger, he saw that a large number of messages remained unread.
This was expected as he had spent 100 no bounds because now he was safe and sound. A huge amount of time has passed and a lot has changed in this world.
Looking at this beautiful place, the boy wondered how other cities had changed during this time. Once he was in a safe place, he was finishing a phone call with his mom. He finally showed up and explained to everyone that nothing had happened to him. He had just disappeared and then turned up, asking them to close the investigation. He promised her that they would meet soon and everything would be fine. As soon as Park finished the conversation, he was approached by a police officer who brought 2 cups of tea. The policeman gave 1 cup of tea to the boy and the other to himself, and they decided to talk. Park was very happy that his mom and family were safe. Their pleasant conversation was interrupted by a man in uniform who abruptly burst into the room. Everything he said sounded completely unclear as to whether he was the right person. The policeman did not understand why this guy ran into the room so abruptly. But when he saw that it was Hanil, the guy who had survived the situation, he understood. This person who was rushing into the room was a student of the unit commander. Cha Hyun-jun took the initiative and ordered the officer to leave the room quickly, even though he hadn't even taken a statement yet. He was shocked by this, but he insisted that the officer leave quickly because if the commander repeated the order, there would be consequences. The first question he wanted to know was whether Park had studied the techniques before opening the divine door. After drinking tea, Park replied that he had never studied anything like that. The commander explained that somehow the boy had managed to wake up his teacher, who had been sleeping for 15 years, and asked if he had been chosen by chance. Park just silently ignored his question, not understanding what he was referring to. But when the commander showed him the system on his tablet, which was displayed in front of him, the guy saw something important. He emphasized that the word ascending was spelled correctly and noted that there are only 9 ranks of saints: ascending, high, great, mystical, celestial, fallen, eminent, divine, and spiritual. The highest rank is the highest. A large number of the awakened are disciples who cannot be called saints, but who have been called and recognized for their qualities and qualified as ascending under the guidance of a teacher. In their world, age and ethnicity did not matter. A person who passes the apprenticeship training holds the position of an elder. Those who did not pass the apprenticeship were juniors. Younger people should do their best for their elders. This is an unspoken rule. Park listened carefully to the commander's words, analyzing them. He wondered if the rising level was a low rank. What rank was the commander's teacher? The policeman was outraged by the boy's words, disgusted that he, being of such a low grade, had lost his mind at all. He lifted him up by his clothes and made him think again, saying that if he was born with a spiritual body, then regardless of the circumstances, he must live under the supervision of his elders in his technique. The policeman was already tired of the boy's stupidity, and he warned him that he did not want to repeat himself. If he stuttered about it again, there would be serious consequences. Puck was laughing, and he repeated exactly the words he had been asked not to repeat, so much so that the policeman loved his teacher that he began to use his cool phrases. The policeman's indignation knew no bounds. His face was filled with anger, and he lost control of himself. He wanted to destroy this impudent man, but when he saw his profile, he shuddered. The profile showed that Park's rank was much higher than that of a police officer. As mentioned earlier, high follows the ascending. That meant the policeman was a lower rank than this guy, and juniors should do everything for their seniors, according to him. Based on these words, it was funny to Park that this policeman was acting so wrong. When he returned to the building after this incident, everything took on a completely different color. The Grand Master felt his energy when he heard that his teacher did not treat him as a senior. The main mistake he made was that he gave away the master's technique that he was using. The master looked at his idiot student and slammed his hand on the table loudly. He was mean. He had inherited a gangster's technique and bowed down before some scoundrel. His apology sounded ridiculous. All this guy named Chu wanted to say was that the other guy's rank was higher than his. He was tall. The master, thinking about the other guy, realized that his build was the reason. If his guess is correct, then he might be special because of his irregular body. If his teacher continues to talk nonsense, he will destroy him. Since his body was earthly, the master explained that to be born with a body like his and his disciples meant that he had an element of wood in his body. Given this, it was clear that the speed of training would be faster, but no one could say for sure about the specifics. People with the element of wood are very rare. They came out of the water, brought back souls. They lit fire to drive out the cold and melted metal to purify it. Living beings have a tremendous relationship with this tree, but it is incompatible with other elements. Most likely, this guy's message for help came because it is a rather rare case, the master analyzed. Given this, his student should understand and not mention the construction method. The master will give him a cure. After thanking his master, his stern gaze did not leave him. He was confused about what the star wind ability meant in people with wood, which he had never even heard of. Our hero was in his room, loudly clicking on the keyboard. He brewed himself some tea and sat at his computer to analyze the information over a long period of time. A lot had changed in the world, and he needed to analyze all the available information. According to the government statement, there is not a single person who has the wrong body. Some people who possess the wrong body were isolated as a result of spiritual and physical tests, and fortunately, the guy was not caught. His wrong body is a spiritual body, which is usually divided into 3 types: heavenly, earthly, and human. But an unpredictable spiritual body can appear, which is a wrong body. Even in the last few decades when saints disappeared, these monsters tried to intervene in their world to stop the evil they were doing. The saints united to stop them using their power. They fought together, and the creatures remained only in legends and fairy tales, often depicting heroes like Chavan Wunchu and Hong Galun. Realizing this, it made no sense to think that other people should be punished because they were or were not famous serial killers like Chung Wuchi and Hong Galong. After drinking a cup of tea, he felt the effects of the medicine on his body. He even felt the effect of brown rice, and he needed to get curious and try this taste to the maximum. Thinking about the blue sphere, he got the result of the earthly body in the test. He didn't know how long the drug lasted, and his attempts to find something similar in terms of effects failed. There was no reliable information. Perhaps there are some restrictions on how mere mortals can find such information. Sitting in his room, he was overwhelmed by various thoughts that made him analyze and think. And one idea came to him, and he began to enter it into a search engine. He entered into the search engine the medicines to be bought, and one of them was a drug containing 3 nutrients: weak nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol. The young hero was interested in this drug, and he wanted to learn more about it. But he began to recall the moment when strange sprouts came out of the monster he had killed. Recalling this, he realized that these were the seeds. He took the seeds out of his bag and placed them in front of him. He realized that he had gotten them from the beast he had fought in that apartment. And perhaps this was a fairly common occurrence. However, the seeds looked rather strange, and there was almost no information about them. There were no pictures of these sprouts, and this made the guy realize that this might be the first such case. Going to one of the forums where there was an anonymous post who saw these seeds, he found the name Purgatory Grass. They looked the same as the seeds in the book, and that's why the person on the forum spread this information. Purgatory herbs grow near the river Styx. Eating raw seeds causes nausea, but absorbing them carries energy. However, the germination conditions take a long time, and it is difficult to get anything. This was interesting information for the young man, who was amazed at the difficulty of germinating them. The fact is that his seeds had germinated, and remembering the moment when he fought the monster, he wondered if he had really made them germinate. Looking at the material he had at hand, he needed to conduct an experiment with these seeds that had not yet germinated. Taking them in his hand, he decided to use the solar wind breathing technique to make the seeds germinate. It would be very interesting if they germinated from his power. He began to accumulate energy, calming all his inner senses and tuning his energy after he opened his eyes. The guy couldn't believe his eyes. His hand, surrounded by bright light, had done the unimaginable. These seeds began to germinate in an incredible way in a few minutes. A few hours later, the policeman decided to visit the boy's room and, as always, entered in an epic fashion. He was looking for Park and couldn't understand why he wasn't in the room because it was empty. After examining all the rooms and lockers nearby, the policeman realized that Park had run away. But in this neighborhood, he couldn't have gotten far. After checking every crevice in the boy's possessions, it was clear that he hadn't stolen anything. The moment the policeman looked into the refrigerator, he saw a strange thing under the film. It was some peaches from the store, and perhaps they were stolen. After a while, at sunset, the guy went to the park. He took a peach pit, planted it in the ground, and wrapped it up. Using a breathing technique, he began to accumulate his energy, which enveloped the place where he was working. The moment he opened his eyes, he saw an even more incredible sight. It was impossible to believe that a whole tree had grown from a simple seed in a couple of minutes. It was a truly miraculous sight for a guy who had never had such abilities in his life. He used the breathing technique for only 2 hours, and they grew so fast and strong. It was just incredible. There were no words to describe it. With the help of the breathing technique, he can exchange energy with everything around him. As he expected, the solar wind has the ability to grow plants. If he can continue to grow herbs using this technique and not have any problems with his body, it will be just fine. Looking at his briefcase, he realizes that he has to try it right now. The place he has chosen is suitable, and if there are any consequences, he will be able to control them. At this point, the guy puts a sprout of purgatory herb in his mouth, and the substance begins to take effect. His aura began to glow with red energy, filling the space with its contrast. Given the wonderful warmth that began to spread from the blue sphere upwards, he felt blissful as he channeled it in this way. But it was over, and the guy opened his eyes feeling like his head was melting. One way didn't work for him, but there was another way, and he tried to activate this technique again. But again, it didn't work, and everything was just like the previous time. It works, but why does most of the energy remain in the lower abdomen? If you look again at the moment when the blue sphere becomes a stronger and better medicine, and how he has to acquire the fictional medicine, it's like he's trying to find a Pokemon by just running around the city. Still, he has to try again. Who knows, maybe something will change for him. He sits down again, his eyes filling with red energy. Spreading his arms, he feels the boundless power in them. It pulsates in his body, as if something hot has moved into his body. And, remembering the message on the forum, he realizes that this is exactly what they were talking about. And if you believe the information about yin energy and purgatory herb, they are of yin nature. The empty sphere has the nature of wood if the solar wind technique is to produce wood energy. This means that he needs to learn breathing techniques that absorb yin energy. If not, then he is disturbed by the life energy cycle. His life will be in danger, as it was at that moment. But in any case, this simplifies some things. The efficiency is reduced, but the generating power is increased by 15 units. Approaching a lawn with a tree that had grown in an incredible way, chi energy was emanating from it. The guy approached the tree, drove his hand into the ground, and he pulled out the tree in accordance with the rules of using the solar wind. He wanted to continue, but an incredibly loud call rang on his phone and startled him. Looking at the emergency message, he thought, "What the hell is going on this time?" But the safety message was warning of a level 2 disaster. The son of His Majesty, the West Sea Dragon King, the young master, died today. And because of this, the entire Han River area and the west coast will be flooded. You need to be careful. The people in the area should evacuate immediately and wait until the ritual is over. The people surrounding Park fled in an urgent manner, as it was too late to receive this message. A level 2 disaster is a pretty serious situation. When they approached him and the doors began to close, it started to rain. And looking in horror, the guys saw worms falling from the sky. Their size was incredible, but there was no need to be afraid because it was only sugar. However, people were still afraid to touch them, worried about the possible consequences. They had to stay in the shelter until everything passed because the bunker had a protective barrier. Every house was the same way, and the boy was glad he decided to go with these people. But soon Park heard people screaming for help. Monsters started appearing on the streets and collecting these worms. These huge animals ate the worms like fertilizer scattered on the streets. A large bird monster stood over a woman holding a dog. She asked to be rescued, but no one came to her aid. This evil creature looked at the woman and wanted to play with her as if she were its prey. And at that moment, Park Hanil saw a legendary and dangerous creature that was simply incredible for the area they were in. A woman fell to the ground and screamed for help. The dog who was next to her barked and was also afraid of this monster. The monster grabbed the woman with its bird-like foot and lifted her off the ground. He threw her up like a toy to play with her. This monster was wearing a container of worms that he had collected while walking the streets of the city. He threw the woman right into this container. Finding herself in a closed space, surrounded by worms, the woman did not know how to react. The monster continued to collect its prey throughout the city. It looked around the city with evil eyes, and the people who were left without shelter were terrified. The men who were in the shelter watched and realized that in a little while they could have been in the woman's place. It was just horrible. One of them smelled a nasty odor, similar to cigarettes. At that moment, our hero lit one of them. Holding onto the tree, he activated his ability and the tree began to glow with green light. Using the influence of chemicals, the guy activated his ability, although not everyone liked the smell of cigarettes. Looking at this nightmare, which was happening from all sides, the guy realized that this was already too much. No matter who is grieving like this, whether it is the Dragon King or someone else, leaving people to their doom is simply unacceptable. He finished his cigarette and threw it on the asphalt. He would not stand for this mockery and ran out of the shelter with incredible speed. Holding onto the tree he was holding and enveloped in the aura of his powers, he jumped up to this stupid bird, which he called an overgrown bird, and struck it right in the head. The monster, of course, did not expect this. He had been calmly destroying everything in his path. And here he was, met with such a surprise. The monster was knocked back a few meters by the strong blow. And now the overgrown boy no longer felt so confident. The boy did not even understand how he was able to deliver such a strong blow. He had never been so strong as to strike such a blow to a huge creature. Thinking back to what he had recently consumed, maybe it was the purgatory weed. But his thoughts were interrupted by the rain, which poured down incredibly fast and soaked him, washing away his sweat. He looked up and realized that it was the rain of the dragon's tears. This rain, dripping on him, activated the stimulant, and the reagent was the dragon's tears. Since his element is wood, water helps trees grow faster and makes them much stronger. By activating and amplifying the energy of the tree element, Park is now capable of almost anything. Holding the artifact in his hands, he is filled with the power of incredible strength, which gives our hero a boost of energy. The tree starts growing right in his hands and turns into not just an ordinary tree, but into an incredibly straight sword that takes shape and is called the Exorcist, which cuts through demons. An incredible aura emanates from it. After a few minutes, the monster began to rise from the broken place where he fell. He was incredibly angry about this turn of events and wanted to destroy this rascal who decided to fight him. Looking at Puck, the monster's saliva dripped from its mouth onto the ground, and its wings spread out right in front of him. The monster, looking at the boy, realized that it was about to destroy him with its energy, which began to accumulate right in his hands. Realizing that it was going to be hot, he took a fighting stance to take any blow. And at the moment when the incredible punch of this monster flies at him, he keeps his wooden sword ready. When faced with this blow, his incredible strength is revealed in this potential battle. He is thrown back a little by the blow, and he rests his feet on the ground. If he relaxes even a little, the consequences will not be long in coming. The monster threw an incredible punch at Park, and a little more and he would have flown to the protective barrier. The boy makes a promise to himself to stand up at all costs. Looking at this, the bird-like monster doesn't understand how this pathetic slug can withstand its strong punch. Not only has the guy withstood the blow, but he's about to counterattack. With a stroke of his sword, he closes the path of this ugly creature. The monster flies back, and the sword of our hero glows incredibly. There was not a single scratch on this unique artifact, and it surprised the guy. The sword was of incredible strength, because the blade of an exorcist cutting through a demon is simply an incredible weapon. The monster looked at the boy with a completely different look. Now it did not see him as easy prey, but as a threat to its existence. The monster looked directly at the blade of this sword. If the rumors about the peach tree driving away ghosts are true, is this monster a ghost? After a strong blow, the monster's prey, along with the worms it had been collecting, spilled out, and the woman began to run away. The monster, of course, noticed her, and the moment she tried to run away from him, the monster began to attack her. Park noticed this mess and, taking his sword, an exorcist's blade, decided to do justice. He knocked the woman out of the monster's huge clutches, saving her life, but it was not over yet, as the danger was that the monster had lifted her high up. The woman had already said goodbye to her life, falling from the huge claws of this monster. But our hero was not going to let the woman die so easily. He flew up and saved her, not letting her crash on the hard asphalt. The girl thanked him with a trembling voice, but now was not the time to relax. The angry monster roared its huge cry and looked at these scoundrels who had violated his plans. Puck started running with this woman as fast as he could, but a huge monster was flying after them, wanting to destroy them. And at the moment when the monster was about to grab them with its big claws, it did. And for a second, they even saw life flicker before them as the claws wrapped around Puck's back. The monster grabbed the boy and threw him to the side, throwing him several kilometers away from the woman, and the woman hit the protective shell of the shelter. The boy landed, hitting the wall and breaking it from such a strong impact. It seemed that he didn't even have the strength to get up. But he breathed in the air, and the aura began to fill his body. It was something incredible for him to get up after such a strong blow and still avoid fractures. The stimulant he had been using had stopped working, and he hoped that the woman had taken refuge in a safe place. Looking up, he saw that the rain had not stopped dripping and the monster had not stopped attacking him. The boy realized that this large creature had switched from the woman to him and was looking at him as its main prey. The demon-like monster was looking at the boy, and it was salivating to devour this disruptor of its plans. Seeing this huge monster rise up, our hero felt funny. What kind of mockery is this? And how hard will it be for him to fight this animal? When he got to his feet, the guy didn't feel the same strength in them anymore. In the current situation, he cannot run for cover, as the effect of the stimulant begins to fade, and this makes him weaker. He needs to survive at all costs, and he thinks about using the sprouts, but If he takes them, it will be difficult to fight against this flying creature. Whatever he chooses, it's a real gamble with a short and very low chance of success. Based on this situation, he just needs to act, because the exorcist's blade that cuts through demons has the properties of a sword and a plant. Part of its power depends on the roots in the soil, and it takes a very long time to exchange energy and sprout, filled with power. But there was no time to think. As he accumulates energy in his body, he realizes that during the downpour of the Dragon King's tears, he has a chance to increase his power by absorbing this rain and accumulating energy to conquer the demons. And he can do it now. Filled with the power of the dragon's tears, the boy fills his sword with energy. He activates the solar wind destruction technique, and the moment he begins to concentrate on the energy, opening his eyes, his sword burned with the incredibly strong energy of a mighty blow. The creature was not expecting such a meeting, and, looking at its opponent, did not know what to do with it and why it was rushing at it with something unknown to it. He pushed off the ground and jumped high up. After a while, the guy found himself above this creature, which was not going to give up so easily either. This punch would decide his fate. After this blow, the monster's head flew off to the side, hitting the building opposite. It smashed through several floors and crushed everything nearby, but Park was not going to stop. Although the creature survived the impact, it was still in its power, albeit stunned. And the moment the monster raised its head to recover, Park, along with a huge shining sword filled with energy, attacked again. As he flew up, he looked into the eyes of the creature. Only one thought was in his mind: to defeat this monster. An incredibly strong blow swept across the city, lighting up all the windows with a strong flash. This incredibly strong monster was left at the site of the impact, but it was already headless. Its body was decapitated, and people looked at it as an incredible sight. The guy stood in front of this incident and just looked at this sight, and some people started filming it. They did not understand how he did it because no one could kill this monster. This beast had a power that seemed divine. Even if someone died from its clutches, the authorities left everything as it was, even though there were complaints about this miserable animal. But this man, without thinking about such things, did not hesitate to save a person who fell into the clutches of this monster. Looking at him, people wondered if he was a superhero. Moreover, it was caught on cell phone cameras that filmed his face, and at the moment when the camera was filming him, a strong kick from the monk pierced his back. The whole street was engulfed in fire, which came out of nowhere. After this strong blow, everything was quiet. Only the phrase, "You damn bastard," was heard in the distance. It was a monk who had woken up from hibernation and was standing next to his student on one of the streets. He asked the scoundrel if he realized what he had just done. If it wasn't his ignorance, he had just killed a bird that Lady Yunwa cherished. After hitting it, the boy smashed the window of a shop, and the master said that the rascal should be burned and ordered the soldiers to arrest him immediately. All this was filmed on a TV channel and broadcast on the internet. People saw this spectacle from the screens of their devices. A huge number of people watched it in real time, and they understood what was happening. They were texting each other and wondering why this master was justifying a monster that eats people, and why he launched a fireball at this hero. How could a guy like that deserve such an attitude? Because the monster almost killed the man, and he saved him. Everyone was even pleased to see this creature die, and wondered if there was any excuse for this creature's cruelty. This man had just saved an entire neighborhood from death, and they were going to put him in jail. It is better to kill this bearded man than to lock up the guy who cleared the city of the monster. Soon, the information was reported to Lady Yunwa, who reacted with shock to the death of her favorite. She asked if they had taken revenge and burned the impudent boy who had dared to kill her messenger. Her assistant reported that he had been subdued and was in custody, but Ms. Yunhua felt that this was not enough, as it was a humiliation of her dignity. For such a scoundrel, mere imprisonment was not enough. This guy needed severe sanctions. She ordered her assistant to tell all the people that if they didn't want to suffer her wrath, they should destroy and burn him. But it wasn't that simple. Her assistant understood that and wanted to warn her that the recording with this young man had become very popular. Because of this, they hope that Ms. Yonghua will be lenient with him, as there is a high level of discontent among the new leadership. Ms. Yunhua, realizing this, has recognized that this world is very boring and that government members are spineless rats. Since her assistant was saying this to her, she had a way to dispel her anger. They have prepared offerings that will keep her dignity and save her name. Looking at this city from a high floor of a building, Ms. Yunhua is excited that she can't wait for this to happen. After a while, Yunhua realizes that the rain is ending, and it looks like the Dragon King is slowly getting over his grief. And this is just an illusion, as if a higher being is free from his own desires. The Dragon King of the West Sea would not mourn the death of a harmful boy who is not even his legitimate son and is probably very happy with the rainmaking ritual. Ms. Yunwa held the object in her hands and realized that she had finally achieved what she wanted. Her assistant, seeing what Ms. Yunwa was holding, immediately understood. Unfolding the object, Ms. Yunwa pointed to it, saying that it was the treasure. It was a fruit known as the treasure of fantasy, even among divine creatures. A sacred tree that bears fruit once every 1,000 years and takes at least 3,000 years to produce its fruit. Now this fruit was in her hands. The mystical tree that grows only in the garden of the Queen Mother of the West was the peach tree of immortality. No one could remember the immortality peaches after the Monkey King and Dunyan Shu, when the Queen Mother sacrificed herself to close the heavenly gates, and then the orchard disappeared. If Ms. Yunhua can make this fruit sprout, her name will replace the Queen Mother of the West, which will mean the ultimate power she dreamed of in her palace on one of the tallest buildings in this city. We return to our hero, who is walking the streets of the city. After the recent situation, he has become quite a popular person, and everyone pays attention to him when he passes by the usual neighborhoods. When he was in jail, the police reprimanded him because he undermined the reputation of divine creatures. They let him live, but told him not to do such unacceptable things again. Because he is under investigation, he will be watched all the time, and if he ever does something wrong, he will face severe consequences. Park didn't expect to be praised for his actions, but he couldn't imagine that saving a person was equivalent to a sin. He thought he was doing the right thing, using his superpowers and magic to make the world a better place. Despite this, his sword was taken away from him, but his skills still remained with him. When he returned home, he stood and looked at the destroyed territory. As he approached the place where the monster lay, he noticed a shiny object that was associated with the creature. Where the body of the fallen monster was, he reached out to pick it up, but when he saw the object, he found only a piece of shiny wood wrapped in a cloth. As he stood by the object, he noticed that the wood looked alive and strangely woven to the paw of this clumsy bird. When he took the piece of wood in his hands, it began to accumulate energy and fill with meaning, as if ready to sprout. But at that moment, the monk interrupted him, calling him reckless, not realizing what he had actually done. Although Park had managed to pluck one sprout from the tree, this did not mean that the consequences of his actions would pass without harm. He used the solar wind to transport the sprout to his hands. Clutching the sprout in his fist, he decided to try to grow it himself, hiding it from everyone. Soon a whole year passed, and the world changed beyond recognition. Amid growing discontent over the worsening odor, the government decided to purify the water. After all, the smell of this water did not allow people to live and enjoy life normally. One man, Bari, felt that something smelled bad. However, the problem was not the purity of the water, but the monsters. A huge snake-headed fish was giving no one peace of mind, and everyone wanted to destroy it. A few months after the heavenly energy wreaked havoc, a monster hid in the Han River. It was a huge snake with glowing eyes that gave no one peace of mind. The 1,000-year-old megalomaniac terrorized the entire city and did not give rest when he crossed the world of monsters and settled in the river of the human world. He became so powerful that he was able to equate himself with God and proclaimed himself the ruler of the Han River. He declared that no one would be able to use the water from the reservoir until a human life was offered to him. People were shocked by such statements by the monsters when they read the news. Sitting in the office, a young man could not accept the fact that the snake-headed fish was so dangerous. He was Yang Guju, a disciple of one of the 8 sacred deities on the Korean peninsula, the Heavenly King. A woman came into the office and asked me to refrain from making comments that did not relate to their meeting. She went to the projector and asked everyone to take the correct position. It was Shinsu Min, a junior disciple of one of the 8 sacred deities on the Korean peninsula, and she was the guardian of Mount Paektu. Yang said that the meeting was complete nonsense, which, of course, did not sit well with the woman. She asked him to explain his position, but he didn't think it was a problem. Jan asked a question that stopped the woman. Does she really think she can solve this problem? First, it is the will of the elders who act as if nothing has happened until mere mortals get bogged down in deep problems and start protesting. The girl did not like Jan's words and she got angry. Unable to stand the tension, she said that his master had taught him poorly because he had no manners. Since 10,000 citizens had contracted an infectious disease and suffered food poisoning, they had to find a solution as soon as possible. That's what the master told her. And as a disciple of the Heavenly King, he dared to insult her master right in this hall. Hearing these words, I looked at the girl and wondered if she could defeat the Lord of the Han River. The provocative question put her in an awkward position. I gave the example that only yesterday, 4 immortals of mystic rank who went to the Han River to fight the snake-headed fish had failed. None of the people in this room have attained such a high rank. So, does she want everyone to consciously agree to commit suicide? Does this woman, who motivates everyone to move forward, really want to do that? The difficulty of fighting the snake-headed fish was that it used both earth and water techniques at the same time, which few could do, just like the Han River Lord. Only a few immortals who possessed powerful ranged attacks or elements that transcend water and earth, such as wood, could help it. But this help would backfire on them. Because what would they care if she didn't even pass the introductory elements? The girl's patience broke down. Her hands were filled with anger, and she broke the object in her hand out of anger. Yang stood up and said that he would rather go to practice than attend such a meaningless meeting. After a while, everyone in the room left and did not continue to listen to the girl. It would have been easy to solve the problem if they had found a person capable of killing the creature. After the unsuccessful meeting, the girl went home. She held the case in her hands and began to open it. When she opened it, she found a wooden sword that was not easy. A year ago, she remembered a man who had killed Mrs. Younghua's bird with this sword and had been arrested for it, though he was later released. The wooden sword made of peach wood was confiscated and kept in the Society of Immortals. It was a rare wooden weapon that could be used even with a low rank. When the sword was in shape, a wave of calm rose in the heavens. But as soon as it lost its final power, the turmoil stopped. The guy she was thinking of was named Park Hanil. If it was him, he was her hope. Park Hanil hasn't left Gwangguk-gu since last year. He works at a restaurant nearby, and in his free time he watches movies and goes out to eat with his mother or friends. Why didn't he say he was using the app? Maybe if you use a mascot or follow his progress, or maybe he knows what he's been through. It's quite expected. Just when the girl was thinking about Park Hanil, her silence was broken by a man who was jogging in the morning. It seemed to be our hero. At that moment, he ran past her, not even paying attention to her. Suddenly, he turned around and ran past the girl again, which made her very interested. But she couldn't let him go and decided to catch up with him. Using the technique of sudden pursuit, the girl ran down the same road as Park. She ran after him for a long time, but the boy was quite agile. All the while she was running, realizing that she couldn't even catch up with him. The guy was too fast, and even her technique didn't help. She used all her strength, even her talisman, but could not close the distance between them. Soon, as she continued to chase the boy, she felt a force envelop her from all sides. There was not even a trace of Park Hanil in the place where she had arrived. Where could he have gone? In a moment, he was in front of her eyes, but then she lost him. As soon as he disappeared from her sight, he came out of hiding, startled the girl, and asked her if she was connected to the Society of Immortals. He realized all along that she was following him, and wondered what she really wanted from him. He didn't plan to run away right away. Observing the boy's gestures and facial expressions, the woman realized that he was so strong that he didn't even use any techniques to escape from her. He didn't even need the help of a talisman. Who was he anyway? In a rude manner, the woman threw the phone into his hand, forcing him to take it. Park looked at the phone carefully and did not understand what she was trying to say. The phone had a user download and was downloading some information all the while. The woman did not answer him and just watched his reaction. When the guy read all the information, he was amazed. What should he do to be left alone? The moment he uploaded his user profile, the information impressed the girl. His basic characteristics were impressive. His divine foundation was earth and wood, and his immortal rank was high. But why was his immortality level lower than hers? Puck looked at her, not fully understanding what she wanted. After this dialogue, it became clear to Puck that this woman wanted to use his tree element to kill the Han River Lord. But he was worried that he might end up in the same situation as he had been in a few years earlier. Do the immortals really want this monster dead? The girl's expression showed that she did not fully understand this. If Park did not understand something correctly, then let it be explained to him. But it seemed to him that no one needed to. The woman replied that their mentors were not doing anything right now because they wanted to see how their students dealt with the problem on their own. Park just shrugged his shoulders when he heard this answer, because it was ridiculous to hear that thousands of people were suffering just because their mentors were waiting for their students to grow up. What would happen if he helped her in this situation? Will the restrictions be lifted and will there be any compensation for his actions? And one more important question. Puck immediately realized that the sword behind the girl was his, and whether he could get it back. But how did he know that the sword was behind her back?
It was simple. He uses his breath to interact with the plants around him. So this is the features of
And this answers the girl's question why he is so fast in this forest. An earth-based immortal is influenced by the terrain that corresponds to this element. The girl gave the sword to our hero, but before he took on the task, he wondered if he could remove the restrictions from it. She replied that this sword was authorized for use in the cleansing. This task attracted everyone's attention, and there were no people who condemned Park's actions because he was only helping and saving them. Initially, the restrictions were imposed by his superiors to punish Park for killing Ms. Yunhwa's bird. That incident was almost forgotten, and it was easy to resolve if a disciple of one of the immortals made enough effort to persuade the person. Taking the sword in his hands, our hero was glad to see it, feeling the strength and power of this sword, ready to kill the ruler of the Han River. We move to the bank, where the toxic smell evaporates from the river and fills the space around it. The team came to accompany our hero, but some members did not understand why they were here and whether they needed to change their clothes. It was not clear why they were here, but it was obvious that this was not a tour. The woman asked everyone to calm down, explaining that they had come to get rid of the Lord of the Han River. Looking at Pak Hanil, she did not understand what he was going to do because he was just standing there. He was looking at this landscape, spoiled by the toxins of this monster, and thinking about his next steps. Our hero, looking at the water, realized that it was simply disgusting. The guy pulled out a box of sprouts from his pocket, which he had prepared just in case, but he did not expect this case to come so quickly. Taking them, he decided to touch the water. The woman tried to stop him because it was too dangerous, but the boy knew what he was doing. When he threw the sprouts into the water, they began to glow in an unusual way. At the moment when the woman wanted to stop him, she stopped herself. She saw the effect of this technique. The sprouts began to grow right in the water. She had never seen this before, but our hero seemed to know what he was doing. It was an incredible water hyacinth, perfect for purifying polluted water. Everything was going according to plan. There was only one thing left to do: to destroy the cursed monster that sensed the presence of unauthorized people on its territory. A few minutes later, a snake-like monster appeared. Of course, it did not like the fact that strangers had come to its territory. Park Hanil, drawing his sword, felt confident in his actions, such as he had not felt for a long time. Looking at this great monster, Pak started fighting, preparing for freshwater fishing with this creature. The first punch of our hero hit the neck of the snake, and the monster did not expect such resistance. In a rage, he began to circle, swirling the water around him, and approaching the boy, he declared that he was the god of this river. He warned the boy and the strangers not to mess with him, for their own good. Hundreds of strikes of this cursed snake flew at our hero, but the guy did not care. He dodged every strike regardless of their number. He ran forward right through the water, pushing off his sprouts, which he threw into the water. Jumping up, pushing off from one of his plants, he flew straight toward the monster. Starting to accumulate an unusual technique in his hand, he prepared to strike this rascal. Soon, this technique formed several spear-like energy strikes that flew straight at the monster's head. The serpent thought that these were just toys for him, but when he felt the blows of Pak Hanil, he realized that they were not toys, and how the man dared to do such a thing. The more the monster attacked him, the stronger Pak's blows became, which he sent directly at him. With each combo punch, the fight became more and more difficult, not as easy as the opponents he had met before. All the monster wanted to tell him was that he was a bastard and would pay for his actions. The people watching could not believe their eyes. Streams of water from the battle covered them from all sides, and they had to protect themselves with umbrellas. A woman watching Pak Hanil fight could not believe her eyes. He used plants and completely cleaned the polluted element of the river. However, she still did not believe in his victory because the beast was incredibly strong. The monster didn't care that Park was using energy that was hard to see. His pathetic tricks did not affect this creature. The River Lord promised Puck that these tricks would not work anymore because he understood his technique. Then he hit him with his sharp tail. Feeling the monster's blow, the boy flew a few meters away and unfastened the bag from his shoulder. At the moment of flight, some luminous objects, similar to sprouts, began to fall out of the bag. When they fell into the water, they began to feed on the energy of the river and germinate in it. Instead of red spots, beautiful water flowers began to appear from the water, purifying the water and preventing the creature from breathing. Having fallen on one of these flowers, the boy held onto its petals to keep from falling into the water. He leaned on the sprouted flowers and used them as a platform to keep himself afloat. He had one last element left that he could use against this horrible creature. He accumulated energy in his body to channel and use his technique against this monster. The arrow-sharp punch of this talisman flew straight into the neck of the monster, and it could not stop it. Realizing this, the monster did not know what to do, as this sprout had entered its body with the help of lightning. It was clear that he was going to destroy it, but the monster decided that if they died, they would die together. Hearing this, Park smiled and said that he had put his whole soul into this sprout. Couldn't the monster feel it? But the monster was not in the mood for jokes. He realized that if he continued to fight, he would simply die. Promising the boy that they would see each other again, the monster fled from the battlefield. The boy breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that he had managed to win the battle. That lightning dart was created for a reason, and it made it clear that he wasn't going to let that monster go just like that. There was energy in his hand that he wanted to direct at the fleeing creature. This dart not only showed the location of the monster, but was also a conduit for its energy. When the boy hit the water with his orange energy, it spread throughout the river. The electric charge reached the dart that was in the monster's body. The monster did not expect this. Its face was twisted with surprise and anger. Who is this impudent boy who is capable of such a thing? Everything around the lake was filled with a yellow, glowing magnetic punch, from which an unlimited amount of energy was emanating. A few minutes later, the sky shone with a completely different color. The water was purified, the air became cleaner, and the sun began to break through the clouds, which the residents of this neighborhood had not seen for a long time. Only a slight smell of fried fish wafted through the air, indicating that the monster had been defeated. Looking at the sunshine, our hero realized that it was much better. This confirmed that Hanil had defeated the Lord of the Han River. Our hero got to the body of this snake monster, having his peach sword with him to achieve the desired result. So he performed an act that could give him a new lease on life. His victory over this monster will certainly draw a lot of attention to him, and he is not sure that everything will end very well now. If the immortals ignored the Lord of the Han River to test and grow their disciples, then this task should be within their power, not ordinary people. After opening the monster's body, he dug around to find an artifact that was very valuable to him. He thought the artifact would be smaller than he expected, perhaps because it was not a real dragon. It was the inner core of an aquatic creature, an effort crystal created with the hope of becoming a dragon. In mythology, it is known as a magic stone that grants wishes and gives its owner whatever he or she wants. Realizing this, Puck decides to keep it as a reward. But soon a strong elder appears over him and calls him an insolent boy. High-ranking people levitating in the air stood above him and asked him what he was doing. With a single movement of the elder's hand, a chain appears above the boy and wraps around him. The chain binds his hands and pulls him in different directions so that this daredevil cannot escape. The question was, does he realize what he has done? It was one of the 8 sacred deities on the Korean peninsula, the Heavenly Wolf King. Looking at the Heavenly Wolf King, the girl did not recognize him, but she realized that things were bad. She remembered what Jan had said at the conference when he had said, "Just act as if nothing has happened until the ungrateful mortals are in deep trouble and start protesting. Because it's all the will of the elders." The fact that they appeared right after the Riverlord was defeated only meant that they were picking the right time to kill the monster. Because of Pak Hanil, this was not possible. She decided to save the man she had talked into it and ran to her companion. She turned to him, not knowing how they had appeared so quickly, but said she wanted to talk to the elder about safety and privacy. Because she was a student of Tebek's, she was immediately recognized and given the floor. The elder asked her if she realized the seriousness of the situation. The man she brought had only been practicing for a year and had no master. Even if the element of wood is rare, is a person without proper training capable of mastering the Han River? Doesn't she have any doubts about him? If she ever opened her mouth and brought her master great humiliation, it would make the girl realize that she was deeply mistaken. The Wolf King looked at the boy as a humiliating and dangerous criminal, but Park Hanil just smiled, making it clear that he didn't care. The king wondered if he had lost his fear, but why should the boy be afraid of anyone? The boy asked him a controlling question. What had he done wrong, and what had upset the Lord at all? If they hadn't doubted our hero, he would have had an unclear basis. Voladar was not the first to think about this, and fortunately the app had already confirmed everything. Only 3 minutes had passed since the guy killed the fish, and everyone suddenly appeared here. It seemed to him that it was planned, and they were already prepared for this situation. He assumed that these people had been watching the fish closely to show up at the moment the boy killed it. Did they really think that killing this monster would bring them the respect of the public? The boy destroyed the pedestal on which they wanted to stand and glorify their disciple. The boy had revealed all the plans of this society, and the Wolf Lord was painfully offended by his words and point of view. For him, it was reason enough to get rid of this impudent boy. The best option was to kill the boy. A powerful blow was directed at the bound boy, who stood against the background of the woman who brought him. Voladar explained that the boy had brought this trouble on himself. His advisors understood that with such strength he could easily destroy him, and that would be very bad for their society. But when the dust settled after the blow, the master saw that things were not so simple. The boy only coughed after this powerful blow and nothing happened to him at all. He expected this because the last time he had been struck directly in the stomach. When he drew his swords and pointed them at the bishop, he was not going to surrender or be afraid of their unworthy influence. The advisors who stood behind Vladika could not believe their eyes. This impudent boy had just dispelled such a tremendous force. The moment the boy pointed his sword at Vladika, it was clear. This was the beginning of a potential war between them. And it would have huge consequences because the Wolf Lord was not going to tolerate such bullying. He asked the boy to say his last words in his defense because the next blow would be his death. But holding his peach sword, the boy only smiled at his words, showing no emotion but laughter. He was not going to die because this lord could not kill him. This made the lord even angrier. Calling the boy a bastard, he promised to wipe him off the face of the earth. And sending a powerful punch at Hanil, the lord wanted him dead. But, holding his peach sword, the boy was ready to withstand the blow. He did not even get upset by such a powerful energy blow in his direction. The explosion swept across the earth, destroying everything in its path, releasing dark energy. When the air became clear again, everyone realized that the boy had not died and was fine. The master looked at him as if he were an incredible monster. All this was due to the fact that one of the saints blocked the blow, not allowing the boy to be destroyed. It was the guardian of the garden, Punbek, a high-ranking immortal recognized by the three heavenly kingdoms. He had come at the invitation of Mistress Yunhua. Punbek noticed that the lord was trying to use demonic power, but it looked like unjustified violence on his part. Judging by the situation, it was clear that perhaps Lady Yunwa was going to take this guy away to take out her anger on him for killing one of her favorite birds. But Punbiok heard this and realized that the lord had crossed the line. If he chooses to fight, don't expect him to run away. They will both earn a bad reputation, but unless you have a good reason, don't get in the way of the elder, the high-ranking ghost immortal said. At that moment, after saying that, Park and the high-ranking elder disappeared from the scene. The Wolf Lord realized that this was one of Ms. Younghwa's requests. But why would such a cunning and insightful woman save this guy? Incredibly quickly, they moved to Miss Younghwa's residence. Walking along the corridor, the elder led the boy through the endless beauty of this house. At the back was a garden that amazed the boy. As they walked down the hall, the elder wondered how the boy knew he was coming and why he was acting so boldly. Park only apologized, but the senior elder told him to take his advice. Even though a boy may think he is great, the higher he goes, the more painful it will be for him to fall. Hearing these words, the guy thought for a moment, but how high has he climbed? He is just an ordinary man. Only after thanking the elder for his advice did they go forward. Walking down the corridor, the boy realized that the elder's words were true. A year has passed since that moment. Recalling that incident, he clearly remembered the confusion everyone was in and the troubles he had to face that day. No matter how good his intentions were, not everyone appreciated his achievement. Now, in this situation, the guy has carefully prepared to avoid the mistakes of the past. Entering the building's gates, he promised himself that he would not repeat the same mistakes. When they entered, they were greeted by the shining light of Mrs. Younghwa, who stood surrounded by her servants on a gorgeous throne. He will not act rashly and will not allow himself to consider Park Hanil a fool. The boy does not accept the role of a victim, and now he intends to learn his lessons, win the victory, and win his place under the sun. He will not be a victim anymore. Word spread very quickly around the city, and there were many discussions on the forums about it. Everyone was interested in why Lady Yunhua was part of the Heavenly Trinity. Some believed that she was distributing half of the divine medicines, but this seemed like a fraud to people, as some had bought precious medicinal herbs without any effect. Mistress Yunghwa had an unusual garden where selected divine-level medicinal herbs were grown. This garden could have been just a rumor, but Park devised a plan to get hard evidence, a plan that would help him get the garden owner's attention. And now he's standing in front of Ms. Younghwa, his finest hour. Greeting Park Hanil, Mistress Yunhua did not recognize him, even though she had heard a lot about him but had never seen him. One of the servants brought him something on a plate and asked him if he knew what it was. On the tablet were seeds of the grass of purgatory, which rarely germinate. To her, it was a value found by mortals struggling with the black market. She did not check the seller who was reselling on the black market and ordered him to be severely punished. It looked like a mystery to her, and she asked the guy if he had any idea who he was. The boy abruptly fell to his knees and begged his mistress for forgiveness, regretting it. He felt terribly sorry that he had no choice, because after the incident he had nothing to live on. Ms. Yunhua asked him to hold his head up and not to fall so low. She said that since he had paid for his sins, she would show him mercy, because his act was not serious. However, the price for killing her bird was much higher. She turned to Park again and asked him again, Why doesn't he work in her personal garden? This offer looked quite tempting. The garden has crops of various kinds, and it is capable of growing refined herbs. In addition, with the help of this common aquatic plant, he managed to clean the Han River from snakehead fish. If he can have a positive impact on her garden, it will be a great achievement. Hearing this, the boy appreciated Mrs. Yunhwa's opinion of him. However, all his talent is limited to just one technique, called solar wind. He explained that ordinary plants bear fruit in a day or two, but the grass of purgatory would not sprout beyond the sprouts no matter how hard he tried. She was trying to mislead him. Looking at this, Ms. Yunhwa could not believe that he was claiming that he lacked skill, but that was the message he was trying to convey to her. Looking at him, she realizes that the guy is much more intelligent than he seemed, and she can't believe that he is already bargaining with her. The guy did not respond to her words, as he did not fully understand what she meant. The woman raised her hand and agreed to his hints. She decided to share some divine-level herbs with him, provide him with the best tools, and give him a partner to help him get used to it, because now he was working for her and his strength should be appropriate. The boy silently looked up at Ms. Yunhwa and still felt grateful. He was infinitely grateful for her kindness. But this was only the initial plan of our hero. He still had a plan. After Ms. Yunhwa finished her dialogue with our hero, she asked the girl standing around the corner to come out to her. A girl wearing a sweatshirt came out of the Garden of Eden and walked toward her. It was a girl with a pleasant appearance named Suri Jejenbi. Ms. Yunhwa asked her what she thought about the situation, and she replied that the guy in this room looks suspicious. He seems too compliant, as if he's playing with her. She also noted that he was the one who killed her favorite bird, which held an important place in the empire. Even if he defeated the Lord of the Han River, people of his level and strength are not so compliant. He has little experience, but his achievements suggest that he is either a genius or a morally unstable psychopath. This was the girl's opinion of the guy she had just met. Of course, Ms. Yunhwa did not fully understand the term morally unstable psychopath. Perhaps they knew what he was up to, but invited him anyway. This is probably why she asked Suri Jajongbi to keep an eye on him. Ms. Yunhwa was very worried, so she initially gave him the management of the Sixth Estate. Even if he has bad intentions, he will probably not be able to go beyond her territory. If he turns out to be useless, Ms. Yunhwa will turn him into fertilizer, which is what she plans to do first, Zhejiangbu suggests. They decided to work together, using the fruit from the Peach Island, even though they have not been able to get a sprout to grow among those who do not sympathize with her. Looking at the boy, she hopes that he will be much more useful than just fertilizer. Walking through the streets of Korea, the boy walked without fear, because all restrictions had been lifted. He realized that there were immortals hiding there, and her strength was over 300 while Lady Yunhwa's was at 400. Within a year, his solar wind level had reached 10 stars, allowing him to see a person's direct strength indicators. He didn't think that number and level meant the same thing. For example, the Heavenly Wolf King had a score of 600, while Master Beck was at the top level with a score of 400. Pulling his phone out of his pocket, he realized that all was not lost. Opening his profile, he saw that the system had congratulated him after updating the app, reassessed his core strength, and something new had appeared. The light step ability and 2 ability cards. The guy purposely showed Shin Samoon the correct level. But if his immortal rank is mystical, then his score would be around 45. For the past year, he has been hiding all the techniques of the solar wind, practicing them only in theory. He realizes that he needs to work in the environment to gain experience. He comes to his place of training. At this place, there was a beautiful paradise tree, with which the guy was an integral part. He brought something special for this tree to make it grow and shine with its wonderful aura. The boy dug a small hole near the tree and put the gift he had received from the ruler of the Han River there. Thanks to this gift, he hopes that the tree will not forget about him and will share its power. He expects the tree to give him some kind of superpower that will increase his strength many times over. Completely immersed in meditation, he sat in front of the tree. A stick was lying next to him. He could feel every part of his body. His thoughts were empty. He focused only on meditation and how to go deeper into it. This could be understood by the fact that his mouth was salivating. Inhale, exhale, he said to himself. However, this saliva was caused not only by his complete immersion in meditation, but also by the enchanting smell of peaches growing nearby. The strength of his attack improved while he just sat in front of this tree and breathed. This kind of training continued throughout the past year. It had been only a week since the flowers of this tree had blossomed and bore fruit. The peaches were small but already ripe. He wondered if he should try at least one. They beckoned him and he decided to try at least one. Behind him, he heard a voice advising him to take his time. He looked back and saw a cute bear in a blue shirt. It was unexpected to see a brown bear here. Park immediately asked if he could find out who the bear was. The bear replied that the elder had named him Gavanak. After that, Puck realized that he was the god of Mount Gwangyangsan and said so out loud. After the heavenly gates opened, the deities stopped hiding. The master of Mount Gwangtaeksan was not so lucky. Hundreds of years ago, when the capital was moved to Hanyang, earthly ministers believed that the fire energy of Mount Wang Oksana would have a negative impact on the area. An earthly minister is a person who determines good and bad burial sites according to Feng Shui theory. By adding water energy, using the mythical unicorn lion statue, and unpacking the South Pond, they gradually weakened the energy of Mount Gwangtaeksan. I wonder if this is why the bear is so small, or is there another reason? He then explained that he had been training here for a year and wanted to meet Park. But they had only met now because he did not want to interfere with the affairs of a person who was devoted to training. Puck mentally thanked the bear for his explanation and suggested that he might want a peach. He apologized to Guang, asked him to wait, and said he had something to say. Park asked him if he had said that you can't pick the fruit. The energy of the tree is concentrated on this fruit, and if you eat it now, the protection will stop working, the bear explained. The bear also warned that sooner or later, although it was inevitable, people would find out about the existence of this tree. He told Puck that there was a person waiting for him under the slopes, and a purple cloud appeared overhead. Everything around him began to change color, and the man looked up. When he saw the abundance of yin energy, he was not happy. Together with the bear, they realized that if they were attacking the barrier so hard, they were determined to catch someone. Probably their goal is the peach tree of immortality. The boy suggested that maybe it was the peach that the Monkey King ate on his journey to the west, but the bear asked him to forget about it. The important thing is that he is now being chased. With so much training, the guy should have merged with this tree. Ordinary people are not able to unlock the healing properties of immortality peaches by eating the fruit. But the bear was different and told Puck so, asking him to give him the peach. He wanted to restore his spiritual energy and protect Puck and the tree from his enemies. The boy took the peach and, with sadness in his eyes, told the bear that he was very sorry. The bear's response was loud. When he saw Puck throwing the peach into his mouth, he shouted at him, "Idiot!" Watching the bear, it was very interesting to understand what was wrong with this madman. However, it was the fruit of the peach tree of immortality created by the Monkey King in Dongfang. After he swallowed the fruit, he wondered what would happen. The reagent of the peach immortality tree immediately took effect, and he felt energy in his stomach. Guanak was also very curious and asked the boy if he felt any changes in his body. It was a little embarrassing for the boy, but he said that the fruit was very juicy and fresh. The bear did not find the words to answer. Only a few words escaped. "You fucking madman," he shouted to the whole neighborhood. Looking at his arm and the bear raging with anger, Park felt the heat begin to spread through his body. Breathing techniques did not work. The heat continued to circulate freely through his body. Although this heat was not like the previous ones, it was much warmer and more pleasant. The bear explained that it takes 3,000 years to produce a lower-ranked fruit, and it is not known what to expect from a tree that is only 1 year old. When asked for help, the bear shouted that even if he wanted to, he could not do anything because he had no strength. He seemed to feel very sick, and he felt that something had hit him in the head. He thought it was a stone, and he was outraged at the guy who couldn't help him and decided to throw stones at him. He took this alleged stone in his hand and began to examine it, but he saw that it was not a stone, but a seed of the herb of purification, which had even sprouted. The bear could not contain his emotions. It was very cute, as he said that this precious thing was now his. Puck threw a few more seeds into his hand. That was all he had. He gave the bear everything. He did this so that he could recover, and he asked the bear if he could recover with this. The bear answered without hesitation, "Of course." Puck then asked him what he could do. The bear said that he could now sell the caves and told the boy about it. Selling caves sounded very strange and incomprehensible, and Puck didn't understand it at all, and even thought he had heard it. The bear added that only 3 purifying grains would not help him regain his strength. He explained that he would start selling caves where people could hide. But that's not the point right now. Park is being searched for, and he needs to deal with this immediately. Picking up his phone, he used a feature that he thought would make things much easier. This feature was a call to a map of the area. On the map, they saw the intruders approaching them, and they had to deal with them. It was obvious that the bear's current strength was not enough. Meanwhile, a guy was approaching Puck, and when he got closer, he found what he was looking for, and he was looking for him. So they stood opposite each other and met each other's eyes. The energy of a disciple of the Heavenly Wolf King emanated from the boy, which Park immediately felt. He asked the boy if he had received orders from his master to return with him. He didn't hide anything and reached into his inside pocket. saying that he had. He added that as a bonus to the order, the master had given him this thing and pulled out a very strange object that looked like a mop. Pack, adding humor, asked him if it was a chaff rag, but he replied that it was the fan of a 9-tailed fox. Hearing this, the bear said that he had seen even a 5-tailed fox only once, and 300 years ago. The bear could not believe that such a treasure was created from a 9-tailed fox, a rare item. He warned that the power of this artifact must be very great. But even if its master, the Heavenly Wolf King, was going to use such power in Seoul, a city full of people, asked Park. In response, the man just asked Park if he could feel the energy. Pointing to the purple clouds above them, he explained that it wasn't so important what technique you were using. It was more important how Park would act. The bear shouted to Park from behind the trees that he meant to use the items that contain the power of the 4 divine beasts. If this artifact generates such a large amount of power, it will be very dangerous. The boy did not understand what it was and why the bear was interrupting him. Park answered him, "I don't know." But the boy was not in the mood for jokes and was getting angrier. He reminded Puck that he was his prey. He said that he would take Puck's life in exchange for his own. It was easy to see that in an instant his strength had increased to an unprecedented level. The weapon in his hand looked fantastic. In this case, Park had to do something, and he reached for his weapon. When Shin Suman decided to test his strength, he purposely distributed it all over the mountain and lowered his skills. At that moment, everything around him began to glow with green energy. This was the first star, a wind gust that Park concentrated and used. He returned the distributed energy. Meanwhile, his opponent waved his mop, summoning foxes that looked very serious and immediately rushed at Puck. Park used the wind gust to spin around with a wooden sword in his hands. As he attacked, the sword swept past the noses of the foxes. In an instant, he sliced them all up, leaving them no chance to get to Puck. Gwanak could not believe his eyes as this man completely merged with the environment. How can a commoner do such tricks? Afterwards, Park asked the man if he had said that no matter what happened, the barrier was impenetrable. He reminded him that if you attack, you must be ready to counterattack. This made the guy even angrier, and he did not hold back his emotions. "How dare you treat me like that?" he shouted. At the same time, he felt the veins on his neck, which continued to spread to his face. In a moment, they spread throughout his body. This energy overwhelmed him, and he could not understand what was happening to him. The only thing left to do was to watch what happened to him. And that's exactly what Park did. A moment later, the enemy's body was lying on the ground, and Park ran down the slope to him. He was still shaking on the ground, but it was clear that he had completely failed. He recklessly decided to use this weapon to gain an advantage over Puck, but his soul was absorbed by the backside of the sacred objects created from 100 evil demonic energies. If this weapon had been in the right hands, there would have been no survivors. Each sacred object is a force capable of moving mountains and turning back rivers. Is the sacred object really that strong? Looking at it, Park examined every detail. There was a loud sound that caught his attention, and he turned his head to the left. However, apart from the explosion and the glow around him, he didn't notice anything else. The man who had controlled the explosion appeared, and he was here because of Yan. He immediately ran to him and shouted his name. It was a simple mistake on the boy's part. It's hard to believe that a disciple of the Heavenly Wolf King has become such a moron. Of course, now this despicable person would not escape the wrath of the Heavenly Wolf King. Even if he was a commander of the Immortal Society or a Red Flame Art Master, he was a child compared to the 8 sacred mountains. Puck immediately told the man that it was only self-defense. A moment later, he walked out of the fire. Without thinking twice, Park challenged the man, saying that he would also defend himself. The man replied that a year ago he should have reduced Park to ashes. If it came down to it, the man was sure that he would burn Park until he was on the verge of death, and then take his half-dead body to the Heavenly King. This was a very interesting challenge for Park, and one that interested him. You could tell by his confident look. The explosions began to sound at once, and Puck dodged them very skillfully. He was holding his enemy's weapon. However, he did not immediately use it, but instead put his wooden sword under each fireball that flew at him. It was very difficult to turn, but he managed to deflect each ball. The magic of this sword was enough to deter such attacks. However, he did not expect one of the attacks, and it hit him, throwing him aside. It was obvious that he was in an unenviable position. His opponent was very strong. There were problems with compatibility. Why fire of all techniques? Gwanak reappeared from behind the branches and began to shout to the boy that to use the 9-tailed fox's fan, you just need to pour all your energy into it and take control of it, regardless of your element. When the enemy set the bear on fire, it didn't take long for Mishka's ass to start burning. Puck thought about what the bear had said. However, he was afraid that he would not repeat Ian's mistake, as the power was very great. Well, whoever doesn't take risks doesn't drink champagne, he thought. Taking the staff, he waved it, and foxes appeared, only this time they were green. The enemy considered Pa a bastard and could not understand how he dared to use the fan of a nine-tailed fox. It was hard for him to hold back this attack, which could easily be seen on his face. The foxes came closer and closer, doing their job. Suddenly, Puck's breathing stopped, and he saw a trace of an attack in front of him. This attack simply tore through the ground in front of him, demonstrating the power of the sacred object. When the enemy disappeared from sight, he wondered where Gwanak was and went forward, not paying attention to the enemy. This was a mistake, because a beam of fire hit him right in the back and pierced his body through. A drop of blood flew out of his mouth and he screamed in pain. After that, he sat down on his knees and grabbed the place where the wound was. The feeling that one of his organs was damaged was obvious and he could feel it. The enemy appeared behind him and asked him how he was not ashamed. It wasn't enough to make the Heavenly Wolf King's disciple weak-minded, but you also used the fan of a nine-tailed fox. He was indignant. It was hard to believe that Pa had survived. I wonder if all immortals are like that, he thought as he formed many fireballs and sent them toward the boy. Many of them flew by, but most of them hit his body. The impact threw him far back, slamming his back against a tree. This time, it was not saliva that flew out of his mouth, but blood from a strong blow to his back. The enemy was not going to let Park use these little tricks anymore, as he thought they were. His plan was to take Puck to the Wolf King. At that moment, Puck was sitting under a tree, holding his wound with his hand, and couldn't believe that this was how he was going to die. Damn, it's true. If it weren't for this wound, everything would be so much easier, he thought. And suddenly something very strange happened. The pain in his body seemed to disappear. The reagent from the fruit of the peach tree of immortality had worked. Had it really happened? In a moment, the analysis of the substance was completed. Let's listen to a very interesting story that happened many years ago. The Monkey King wanted to become invulnerable and was given impenetrable skin. No sacred object of the heavenly armies could harm him. He lasted 49 days in the eightfold journey of heaven. Despite the pressure of the Buddha's 5 fingers, his skin served him as a faithful shield for 500 years. Dongfang Shou had an immortal body and gained power over cells. Even the most terrible techniques created by the messengers of death could not defeat him. In the end, even the Dungeon King gave up. That's how Park Hanil got what he wanted, namely a special apparatus responsible for various metabolic processes, including the neutralization of poisons, the liver. Hanil's new liver filled his body with cool water. The enemy was stunned when he noticed that this energy was water. The enemy could not understand how the boy had such capabilities when he saw him stand up, but this only inflamed him even more. The fact that the guy had an incomprehensible base made him stunned. Park said he didn't understand how it happened, but the coolness, unlike the heat, was invigorating. Then he took the fan in his hand again and waved it, summoning a nine-tailed fox. The foxes, hungry for meat, flew toward the enemy, opening their wide mouths. The enemy could do nothing but wonder how this was possible, and all he saw in front of him at the last moment was emptiness. After a while, Gwanak's paw touched the boy's face, and he asked him to open his eyes. Park finally regained consciousness, opening his eyes a little. When he got up and sat down, the bear couldn't understand how he had filled the whole area with water and asked him about it. Park did not understand many things himself, but the word water only raised his interest. What water? Raising his head, he saw the body of the enemy floating in the lake that had formed at this place, and it had not been there before. The roots of the trees had been washed away and were lying on the ground, just like the trees themselves. The whole ground was covered with traces of a strong current. He looked up and saw the devastation he had created. This attack gave the enemy no chance of survival and left him swimming like a lone fish with his back to the surface. But, unlike a dead fish lying belly up to the surface, he swam with his back to the water. After dragging this bastard a few more meters, they started looking at his body because Park had heard that there was a flag used as a remote control for the barrier. And they were looking for it. And then they suddenly found something interesting. It was a pouch. I wonder what's inside this bag. The bear immediately said that it was a bag of treasure. He had heard that, in simple terms, it was a magic bag for storing small and large objects. We can assume that Yan must also have the same bag. The bear emphasized that there was no need to stay here, as reinforcements might already be on the way. This made the boy think, but he did not take his eyes off the body of the bastard. Taking him on his shoulder, he walked forward, and after a few dozen steps, he threw him to the ground. Gwanak did not stop being curious and asking a lot of questions about what he was doing and what he was thinking. He kept reminding Puck that if they stayed here, the enemies would find the peach tree of immortality. Puck was already annoyed by the bear's words, and he simply asked for a few seconds, and an energy layer began to form in his hands. He took this ball and pressed it into the ground right next to the man's body, creating a circle of energy. It was a desolation by the solar winds, the two-star art of the Song of Songs. Leaves began to fall from the tree, covering the ground around the man. Park used the body of the Taoist opponent as fertilizer for the tree, speeding up the flowering process. Fortunately, they were not too late, and now they can smile as they stand next to this tree. They were not late because help was already very close. The peach tree blossomed and the barrier worked, while the men just wandered around looking for it to no avail. "What a pity," said the bear. "If this Taoist had any element other than fire, Pak would have been able to grow a new fruit." Although as it was, the peach tree looked very beautiful, already blooming. Speaking of the fruit, Puck asked the bear if it had any special healing effects, but he didn't know because it was a very valuable and secret treasure, and only a few people knew about it. The effect varied depending on the size and time of ripening, so maybe that's true. Even so, when Pak passes the energy through the liver, the energy of the water increases, and there is a lot of it here. He wondered what the result would be if he ate a fruit that had been blooming for much longer. This topic never left his mind, and he continued to think about it. But he was interrupted by a bear who spoke to him. After that, he asked Pak to show him around. "Can mountain deities go wherever they want?" the boy asked again. The bear answered that they could. It was not a problem. They just needed to create their own clone. The only question was whether Guanak had the energy to do so. As their views converged, the bear wanted to look at the world through Puck and see its manifestations. But it's not that simple, and the boy asked to share something in return. It was not a problem for the bear. He immediately brought Puck a very interesting thing and gave it to him directly in his hand. It was a Motdogson, a peanut snack that looks like a club. The name was censored, and now it has this name. Holding this huge club in his hands, Park thought it was just a snack, but the bear was ready to explain what it was. Since ancient times, all over East Asia, including the Korean peninsula, amazing creatures began to appear, an intelligent race called goblins. They were not only strong, but also spiritually developed from birth. Their character was outstanding. In addition, they had special tools that made their abilities more perfect, a goblin helmet and a club. After the bear explained, Park wondered if he could use the club, because after the story, it seemed to him that only the owner could use it. "That's right," the bear answered. "It's an incredibly important treasure that can be exchanged with goblins for anything your heart desires. A goblin helmet and a club cannot be made twice. The loss of one of them means the loss of half of the owner's power. Thus, Puck can make the owner do whatever he wants. But there's one catch. Since the bear was just lying there, he doesn't know who the owner is, so he picked it up by accident. Well, it's not so bad, Park thought. I didn't expect anything else from the bear anyway. After that, he said that he was willing to show the bear around, and the bear was happy to hear that. The bear could not believe that he was going to go to the outside world. The most interesting thing for him would be to go to some lady's house and work in her garden. They had a few things with them: the flag of the Dark Northern Squad, the second treasure bag, and the treasure book. The Seoul Summit will be postponed to the 1st of next month due to the approaching new year. The government has already ordered a special meeting between the heads of state and representatives of the immortals. They were traveling in a car and heard the announcement on the radio. The driver even said he heard that the reason for the summit seemed to be called the Tower of Babel. It immediately became clear to Park, unlike the driver, that it was the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is an unprecedented structure built by people of an ancient civilization in an attempt to reach heaven. Unprecedented means unique. Although the myth of the Tower of Babel has been passed down from generation to generation, the tower itself existed long before the gates of heaven were closed. Thanks to the current dynasty of immortals, it will be rebuilt according to the design of Babel. The news continued to talk about whether the languages would lead to a single image if the Tower of Babel was rebuilt according to the design of Babylon. This is an advantage in itself, but the consequences will be significant. First of all, there are a large number of businesses tied to translation. These words that Park heard next made him think that this was a completely different story, as he thought it would never affect him. And then suddenly he heard a tire whistle, which scared him very much. The car braked sharply because of a girl standing right in the middle of the road. What happened? Did a monster appear or something? Park immediately asked the driver, not realizing what had happened. He held his breath and looked closely through the windshield, trying to see what was there. Behind the glass was a girl who told him it was time to get out of the car. After getting out of the car and taking a few steps, he introduced himself. She also introduced herself in return and explained that she had been asked to help him. He was pleased to meet her and told her so. She replied that she didn't care if he was on the verge of death or if he was useful, but if he dragged her into some dubious story, it would be very bad. He didn't have to think long, and he understood immediately, promising to be as careful as possible. The bear had already transformed and was in the form of a case for his phone. More precisely, it had become a popsicle, copying the environment, and he was sure that the times were not going to be good. He knew her a little. This girl loved very handsome men. The bear began to talk about her. A long time ago, there were rumors about an incredibly handsome man who was famous throughout the island of Jeju for his elegance. Moon Doran, the son of the god Moon Gyeoksong and an ordinary girl named Jae Jongbi, had the honor of seeing Moon Doran while he was taking a bath. It was then that her spiritual power awakened, even though the heavenly gates were closed. This story from the bear was very dubious, and Park wanted to believe that he was deceiving him because it seemed impossible. I had heard that people are able to awaken spiritual power when their minds and bodies are in critical condition. Such people are chosen and elevated by the gods themselves, the bear added. He went on to say that she was accepted by Moon Gyeoksong as soon as she gained power equal to that of Moon Doran. And then she bravely followed Moon Doran. Needless to say, how did he meet the young immortal poor thing? She thought he had no reason to see her, so she wanted to create one herself. It took her less than 100 years to conquer Jeju Island. You can easily say that she has a temper, because at that time there were cries for mercy in the streets. If we compare it to a flower that can reach the heavens and wipe out all life, it would be the flower of destruction, the Asura. It is with such a flower that she can be compared. When she became a representative of the dynasty, she officially proposed to Moon Doran. But he and his father were afraid of her. They decided to get rid of her when she was preparing for the wedding, thinking about a happy future. Father and son enlisted the support of Jeju Island. On the day of the wedding, when she was applying yoji and goji in glitter, some people came to visit her. It was at that moment that they wanted to kill her. The ninjas who appeared and flew at her were all that was heard. Die. It was not her beloved Doran, but an armed assassin. She was angry. And after that, they all had a bad time. They flew in different directions. Despite the damage she had suffered with the help of the Flower of Perdition's abilities, she still didn't let her enemies escape. Since then, this battle has been called the Great Battle that almost destroyed Jeju Island. But in the end, everything was a little different. The one who was defeated was Jae Jongbi herself, who was also a loving person. She was approached from many places to acquire similar abilities. She was sent handsome, reliable men, unmarried, because rumor had it that she was only interested in such men. If not for the intervention of Princess Baradegi, who knew her, she might have been expelled from the Korean peninsula. After this story, the bear asked Park if he was now satisfied that she had no reason to hate him. It was unclear why, but the bear hinted at his appearance that he did not look good. This angered the boy, and he asked the bear if he wanted to go home. This whole conversation with Gwanak distracted the boy, and he was a little further away from reality for a while. The girl could not stand it any longer and asked him what he was doing there. After a while, they arrived where they were going and stood in front of a giant gate. He needed to get in as soon as possible. In a moment, they were inside, and she was explaining that there are 6 gardens inside the lady's castle. Each of the gardens has a number, from 1 to 6. When they got to where they were going, she pulled the gate and explained to him that he could only stay in the 6th garden. Questions arose in his mind. Was this garden lower than the others? He realized that it was unlikely that she would allow him to go straight to the valuable medicinal plants. Opening the gate, they went inside, and it dawned on him. He saw 2 suns in front of him. He couldn't believe it, and the garden was completely empty, as if there were not a single living plant there. Why is it so empty? You would think that no one had looked after it for a long time, he thought. This was important because now he would be the owner of a 6th garden and could sow the fields and protect them from the locals. He then asked her about the gardeners and the former owner of the place. She replied that they did not exist here at all. The garden became inaccessible when its last owner died 100 years ago. As the world changes, the number of immortals grows, and the value of lesser herbs must increase due to increased demand. After many years of decline, the 6th garden has been reopened. The girl added that this does not mean that the boy's work will not be paid. When the harvest time comes, he will be rewarded with so much that other gardeners have never dreamed of. She wanted to continue talking, but her phone started ringing. Park was surprised to hear a Japanese ringtone. Quickly, she began to take the phone out of her pocket. In her haste, the phone fell out of her pocket. Puck saw who was calling, and there were very handsome guys on the screen, and the number was signed as Prince. It was at this moment that Park remembered her past and told himself that he had to be careful because if he did something wrong, there would be disaster. He kept repeating the word careful to himself. Then he told her that he respected her very much. Mishka sat above the master, waiting patiently for him to wake up. The owner finally opened his eyes, not realizing that he had just been sleeping. He had a big question mark in his mind. Why had he been sleeping for so long? Had 2 whole hours really passed? He began to explain that he had hit the bullseye, and even Mishka was surprised, because he had never seen a person do this without any outside techniques. He only hoped he hadn't been beaten. But Mishka started talking about how the 6th garden grew the least, because the best seeds were chosen, and their taste and quality were simply incredible. This made him realize that by the next harvest, they would definitely be watching to see how well he took care of the place. If he shows them his skills, they will definitely ask him to grow even more valuable plants. He must not use this garden to become much stronger than he is now, so that no one else will dare to abuse him as they did before. In the world of restless immortals, he will not allow anyone to touch him or his family. So he told Mishka what he needed to do to make it happen. First, he would have to deal with the abandoned field, because it was in chaos. He reached for his briefcase. The sword in it was completely destroyed, its hilt turned to ash. Looking at it, he only realized that he had overdone it this time. Picking up the sword, he stuck it in the ground and thanked it for saving his life several times. Leaning his head against the sword, he realized that he had to do his best. Even Mishka looked at him and could not believe that he was asking so sincerely. It would seem that it was just a plant, but he could take it to heaven without regret. From this sword grew an incredibly beautiful tree. The tree spread its roots further, wrapping itself around the sticks that were driven into the ground. After that, a beautiful fence was created from these roots. They were more than alive. The peach tree, which had been burned to the ground and took at least a month to recover, was transformed in just a few seconds. He pointed his finger at the 2 trees and commanded them to come back to life. Using the Sun Wind Execution 9 Star Earth Cultivation Song art technique, he created living creatures out of wood, their eyes glowing green and the energy around them of the same light. He entrusted these 2 beings with the duties of an experienced farmer. They turned around and began to approach each tree, giving them the strength that was inside them. It was an incredibly pleasant sight to watch. Mishka was delighted that his master was able to generate life energy in the trees, something that even an experienced top-ranked immortal would not have been able to do easily. Since he had expended so much energy, he wanted to rest, and Mishka offered him some unabi because they had just ripened and were incredibly sweet. They continued on their way to a house with a thatched roof. When they opened the door and looked inside, they were very surprised. Pleasantly surprised because it was much better than he had even imagined. The previous owner of this garden was Park Hein, also known as Gu Mijin. Mishka found out about this after reading a biography on the coffee table. He did this while the guy was resting and sleeping. The guy had a backpack that he put on the floor to rest after a hard day. He needed to meditate to regain at least some energy. Restoring the garden had taken a lot of his energy. Suddenly, he was seized with anxiety, and he stood up feeling something unusual. His pulsation matched that of the plant, synchronizing with his breathing. The greatest energy was coming directly from the floor. The most convenient option was to use the date seeds for this purpose. In an instant, he had a stick in his hand, which he held tightly. With all his strength, he struck it directly on the floor under his feet. This stick could be used as a battle axe. It could easily pierce through anything. He struck again and again. Suddenly, a strong energy began to come out of the floor so strongly that it threw him away, and Mishka was forced to hold on tightly to the shelf he was sitting on. After that, when they looked down, they could not understand anything. Below them was a giant sign in the shape of a star, and in the center was a white yin-yang symbol. It was a barrier structure drawn in blood. The one who created it had used a large amount of evil energy that exceeded all limits. Perhaps there is something inside, because the pulsation was coming from below. Having no other choice, he pulled out the same axe he had used to punch the hole in the floor and swung it. He was sure he could break the barrier, so he struck again. The cracks parted, the energy subsided, and they looked inside. It was a barrier protecting the secret room they saw downstairs. There was a nightstand with a large notebook on it and something else next to it. Park Hein, the owner of the 6th garden, is also known as Gu Mijin. He wanted to pass on important information to the next owner of the 6th garden. About Lady Yunwa's outrages, his notes on this matter were very serious. One day, on his way home, when all his friends had already left, he accidentally wandered into the shrine of the patron god and was possessed by a ghost. A good scholar was passing by when he could not do anything, and he managed to drive the ghost out. The scientist scattered red beans, and he was grateful to the scientist, but the scientist explained that the ghost had managed to possess him. which meant that his spiritual power was unlocked. The scientist explained that he must now follow the instructions of the immortal. The grateful scholar then invited him to Lady Yunwa's pavilion. He said that if he managed to develop his spiritual power and devote himself to practice, he would be able to reach the heights. But for someone born immortal, it is almost impossible to become a high-ranking immortal. He did all the hard work, seeing no end to his duties, until he finally gave up. But that changed when he was about 30 years old. He met a girl with a story similar to his. The facts that allowed her to discover her spiritual power impressed him greatly. Her responsibilities were the same as his. At that moment, he realized that he had become possessed by ghosts, not because of the shrine of the patron saint, but because of a scientist who had deliberately sent them to him. He was just a grain of sand, a scapegoat for the carefree life of some, a part that could be replaced at any time. As he gained experience, he realized that he could no longer be a servant. He had to bow down to every master of the earth and ask to be taught. Sometimes he even wanted to commit suicide because of the feeling of helplessness. But one day, a miracle happened. Lady Yunwa expressed her gratitude for his sacrifices and gave him possession not only of the sixth garden, but also of secret materials that had been passed down from owner to owner for generations. His emotions knew no bounds. He promised never to forget Lady Yunhua's charity and vowed to take care of the garden until his death. From that day on, he devoted his energies to learning the art of the Earth Dragon, improving daily and reaching almost rank 10 of the Secret Immortal, which is the 4th rank out of 9 possible. But over time, his body grew weaker and weaker despite his great success. Only then did he unravel the secret of the Earth Dragon art. This power was extraordinary, but it was absorbed by the medicinal herbs of the garden, not by him. The book said that he did not realize that his life was coming to an end, serving only as fertilizer for the garden. He had only seen such things on TV and could not imagine that even immortals could do such things. It was truly disgusting. He only pointed out that there was nothing unusual in the book's content, Mishka said. Mishka explained that it was the established order. Immortals do this to maintain their kingdom. Now he had to wonder if this meant that he could repeat the fate of Gu Mijin. But he kept telling himself, this will never happen. I will never become a slave like him. If there is someone who can break the barrier of his blood, this person must be outstanding, able to burn the cursed pavilion for the sake of his descendants. It was written that one must escape with the stolen treasures and protect them at the cost of his own life. This meant that he was talking about things that were close to a testament. Mandrake seeds, grown by people from all over the world, are also called screaming ginseng because they take lives with their scream. But there was another very interesting thing on the table that he picked up. He was annoyed that there was nothing written in the book or on this thing. Mishka assumed that it looked like a container for bamboo sticks, but it was very strange because he could feel something from this thing. The impulse that came out was from it. He decided that he could do something with his power and closed his eyes and began to concentrate. Suddenly, an impulse gushed out of her like a river, and the boy even jumped back. Mishka saw his master flying away and rushed to him. But Puck was just happy that this thing really works. But it refuses to grow, so it was designed that way, and its shape should not change. This only added an additional question. What the hell is this thing? He continued to look at it curiously. After he swung it a few times, he realized that it felt very familiar, like a sword handle. Mishka also assumed that it could be a blade. But what would happen if it really was a blade? Meanwhile, the lady is elsewhere. She was being carried by people and now she was there. Having traveled a long way to their humble place, she was greeted with a smile. As the mistress of the Isonakami shrine, her appearance was impressive, and the energy emanating from her was even more powerful. She said that because of the controversial situation, she had to point out where to start, and added that she had heard about their treasures. Then she added that she owned one thing that was lost hundreds of years ago during a very horrible event, and she really wanted it back. Meanwhile, Puck and Sack on his head were looking at the thing they had found with curiosity, not knowing what it was. They assumed that it might be a sword hilt, because the energy emanating from it was very strong. The 7-toothed sword of Sotishito was an amazing artifact, as was the place where it was first made. Bekia was an unrecognized state because among the 3 kingdoms, it was the only one that lacked the strength to gain sovereignty. Bekia's force was founded by Park Hekosa, who had unusual physical characteristics. Goguryo was founded by the legendary Jumon, the son of Lady Yunwa, who was blessed by the spirits and ancestors of the Korean peninsula. However, Baekje was founded by Chief Onjo, relying only on his strength. He belatedly awakened his earthly powers and received the golden element by learning how to control his energy on his own. Chief Anjo was a human being, but with a divine mind. Thanks to his abilities, Baekje flourished early on. But eventually, due to the weakness of his successors, the state fell and disappeared without a trace. However, there remained one who was compared to the leader's genius, the legendary prince who expanded Baekje's territory to the entire western part of the Korean peninsula, King Kincho. The seven-toothed sword, made by the legendary prince himself, was a rare work of art, a precious object comparable to great sacred artifacts. Ironically, it was kept separately, and it was for it that she had come to get it, telling her everything she knew and something else she knew. In the past, there was a record of this sword being handed over by King Gyeongcheo to the Heavenly King. The messenger who carried it died because of a storm that suddenly hit the poor man. Fortunately, the ship with the sword survived, but they only received the blade. Only the woman realized what this meant. The sword did have a hilt. She noticed that she had learned about the existence of the hilt relatively recently and asked why they were interested in its whereabouts now. She replied that she was not here to ask stupid questions. In 6 months, she planned to start a battle with the Celestials on behalf of the shrine. She immediately asked about the conditions. Without hesitation, she answered, "The Blade of Sodashido." She assumed that victory could be theirs, and asked to take one thing from their estate, and if the hilt was there, she promised to take only it. They agreed not to disclose what they would see there. However, the woman asked to add one more condition, which she told her about. After a while, they were walking down the street, talking about the fact that the battle with the Celestials would be broadcast. Lady Yunwa said that she wanted to make this information public. Meanwhile, they were approaching the 6th garden, and the man asked them to show respect for its owner and be quiet during the inspection. They lined up, the leader standing in front and the man behind. The gate opened, and behind it was a beautiful garden with thousands of species of plants. They went inside and were amazed at the beauty around them because this place had recently been lifeless. They plucked different parts of the plants and ate them. Park welcomed the guests by sitting on a comfortable bench, reading a book and enjoying the fruits of the earth. But the person standing in front of him was very indignant, because it was Sir Lee, an immortal of the 5th rank out of 9 possible. Lee demanded respect, and Park got up from the bench, walked over to them, and extended his hand, introducing himself as Park Hanil. Lee said he had come to give him a report on his progress. However, Lee had one grievance that Park did not understand. Lee resented the fact that his subordinates were forced to call him senior. Park showed them his card, which read, Divine Level Park Hanul, Spiritual Power Type, Earth Element, Wood. A moment later, they were already ordered and were carrying stones under his gazebo, while Lee talked to Park about the battle with the Celestials. Lee explained that the Celestials had decided that 2 players, from the 5th to the 9th ranks, would fight against the Japanese. Park replied that he rarely left the garden and didn't even know about these events, and asked Lee if he would participate. Lee replied that he most likely would. Lee, during the Korean War, as a result of the shock of the explosion and the loss of his family, awakened his spiritual power and later came to Lady Yunhwa's pavilion. He could have despaired, just like Gumijin, but Lee was talented and very capable, literally shining when he met the master. He had reasoned that most Celestials could not be trusted, but Lee's sincerity was amazing. Earlier, he apologized for the behavior of his subordinates. Lee told us who would be participating in the Battle of the Best. It was Guo, who would soon receive the 6th rank of Immortal. He was said to be a blood relative of King Dimension, the son of Lady Yunhwa. Lai was only too happy to be able to fight someone like Guo. Park was very interested in Guo's name, and he began to think about him. At that time, she informed everyone that the shrine had accepted their offer. At the meeting, everyone was told that mortals strongly supported them because they had killed several creatures. If you take an active part in debates about the dignity of a nation, you get more praise than Shin Soman, as she called her, a disciple of Tebek who had barely killed a living creature. A woman appeared behind her and asked the hostess to listen. After a moment, the mistress wondered why the owner of the 6th garden wanted to see her a second time. She asked him to tell the impudent man to wait, because she was having a family tea party. Then the woman whispered something in the owner's ear. But Guo Chual, a divine-ranked immortal, heard this and exclaimed in indignation, "How dare he challenge me?" The mistress saw nothing wrong with their battle and told Guo so. Guo Hyunhua added that they say he deliberately does not raise his rank because he is afraid to fight stronger opponents, and suggested that he prove his courage in battle if he does not like what they say about him behind his back. The boy didn't understand what she was talking about, but the mistress supported Hyunhua by confirming her words. She wondered if he could stand up to the owner of the 6th garden. His eyes showed mixed emotions. His teeth were gnashing as he clenched his jaw harder because of the words he heard from his family. A moment later, they were standing on the battlefield. Park versus Go. She, fanning her face with the fan she always carried with her, watched them closely. Each of the spectators was holding their breath in anticipation of this promising battle. It was announced. The owner of the 6th garden, Park Hanil, was confident in his abilities. Standing against him was the one who always controls his energy and holds himself confidently, Guo. Guo looked directly into Park's eyes and said that he would not be to blame if he died. Puck thought about the fact that Guo was looking at him as if he wanted to kill him. But he clearly understood that Guo's anger could play into his hands. The battle is declared. The battle for the divine title of Immortal begins. By the way, Puck sometimes wondered why there were so many ranks, and even his head hurt from these thoughts. This was Mishka's finest hour because he could explain it. Teacher Guangok explained the ranks. Ordinary person, 1st rank, high, 2nd rank, superior, 3rd rank, mystical, 4th rank, surpassed, 5th rank, spiritual, 6th rank, saint, 7th rank, supreme, 8th rank, divine, 9th rank. Park Chan-yul and Go Hyunhwa were at the 5th rank of the divine level. Go Chael was also at the 5th rank of the divine level, and Go Hyunhwa was at the 6th rank. We thank Teacher Guok for explaining the ranks. After announcing the start of the battle, Go immediately began to demonstrate his strength. He continued to ask Park not to blame him if he ended up in the fire of death. At this point, Guo was already using his strength, showing everything he could do. The entire area around him was captured by his chakra, and he attacked every point of the ground in front of him. Puck only had to dodge his attacks, but he began to form a barrier right in his hand. By putting it up, Park showed what he was capable of. The opponent doubted that he would be able to block the attack with the leaf shield. He saw the leaves falling off it. Guo suggested that Park should say goodbye to this technique, as well as all the others. Guo was working a miracle and was sure that it would be enough. He kept repeating how close Park's end was. Park, in turn, apologized for what was about to happen, as his leaf shield was already fully charged. After performing the Sun Wind Execution 2nd Song Art Star attack, he was confident that if anyone failed, it would be only Guo. After that, he performed the Solar Disclosure attack. This attack knocked the opponent down, and Guo began to fly backwards. This made Guo think that Park's shield was not only unusual, but also capable of absorbing power. Guo summoned all his strength to push off and rush to attack. However, this ended in failure, as there was already a giant shield over Puck that could not be penetrated. Suddenly, a man appeared and interrupted their battle and apologized for interfering. Damduck appeared, explaining that they couldn't leave the child behind because it was already obvious who the winner was. Go assured him that he could continue fighting, but Dam looked at the goddess and waited for her words. He added that he was confident in the undisputed victory of the Taoist Pak. Even with his powers, he would not be able to create such a pavilion. The hostess immediately thought about it. Damduck's talents were very impressive, which is why she listened to his advice. He didn't understand why Lady Yunwa was so easily agreeing to her nephew's request, but she asked him to come to her. She was also curious about who the guy next to him was. From the looks of him, his strength must have been impressive. The first question she asked him was about what kind of training he had been doing for the past 6 months. He explained that because of the rarity of the wooden element, the pace of his martial arts development was quite fast. He also told her that he knew why she, the lady, had given him this position, to make him grow something, and assured her that he could grow it right now if she wanted. He assured her that if she trusted him now, he would never betray her. She was impressed by his courage, and she realized what he had been thinking about since he arrived here. She told him that now he needed to focus on the competition and she would think about what he had said. On his way out, he asked her one more question, if he could go outside for a while. After a while, he was walking down the street with a guy in completely different clothes, on a lightweight bike, and he could not even think that when the lady said she would find him a walking companion, it would be him. He turned to him and asked his name, and he apologized for not introducing himself yet. He then said that his name was Damduk, but for Park's sake, he allowed him to call himself just Diok. Park noticed that compared to the way he looked when they first met, he was unusually soft today. As he walked the streets, he noticed many interesting things and simply did not understand many things. Afterward, Park suggested that they have a banana-strawberry cocktail. After ordering a cocktail and some other goodies, they put on sunglasses and sipped their cocktails. Daok was very happy, and although he had heard a couple of stories about the human world, he could not imagine that there were so many delicious and interesting things to eat here. He told us that when he first died in the human world, Lady Yunwa helped him become a celestial. But he didn't know that because of that, he would have to live in the celestial world. He wanted all people to know his name after he died. But now he realizes that these were immature dreams. Being in the world of celestials, he constantly thought about what he had not managed to do in the world of people. And as a result, he remained a mediocre ruler of the past. After a long conversation, he realized that he had spoken too much and thanked Puck for his attention and for being able to enjoy the world of humans. Park replied, "No way." And looking at his phone on the navigator, he noticed that if they went straight ahead, they could see Gwanghamun. But suddenly they heard people shouting very loudly and holding placards with inscriptions. "Human sacrifice is murder." They were shouting that it was enough to turn a blind eye to the deaths of innocents and holding banners. The boys realized that it was a protest, but the words sacrifice alarmed them. Deok could not believe that the head of this country was killing his own people. How such bastards could continue to exist, he did not understand and crushed his cocktail in anger. He immediately suggested that Puck go to their leader and talk to him. But suddenly he saw something very strange. The sky seemed to be covered in darkness, with only a bright light coming from a black ball in the sky. It was a solar eclipse, and the sun was under this black ball. They immediately realized what was happening, and Deok asked Park to protect the local people. People started running away, screaming, "Help! And help!" The energy and attacks were very strong, and he appeared, the one who considered all people to be creatures who do not know their place. His cap said, "Huabin," and this young man who thought people were beings who did not know their place was called Yongxin. At this point, having created a weapon, Park jumps on him. Expecting to strike him, he hits him with all his might. A loud explosion rang out in the neighborhood. The explosion was so strong that it left a huge impact mark on the asphalt, but John was not there. Looking around, Park could only hear people screaming for help. Everyone was running wherever they could, hiding from the attacks. There was no mercy for anyone. Anyone who came under attack could not stay alive. Park looked at these bastards and could not contain the anger that was bursting out of him. But when he turned his head, he saw something large approaching him. He barely managed to dodge a giant piece of earth that was flying right at his head. John turned to Park, saying that he never expected to meet him in such a place, and called him a wanderer from another world. In the name of Huabin, Yong said he was going to take Park's life. The Huabin is South Korea's first nationalist group of Christians, also known as the Poor Man's Gang. Park thought that John's actions were completely ridiculous. John's energy and very essence were one of the handmaidens of the Heavenly Wolf King. Park immediately recognized this unfavorable yin energy. He had felt it since the statue exploded. Puck asked her if she was close to Yang Guiju, the one who leads the group of the poor. Hearing that name, her teeth clenched in anger.
She was ready to hear anything from Park, but she was sure that she would make him pay for all his crimes no matter what.
However, Puck did not understand the word crimes. Putting his hands on the ground, his energy spread around, his chakra going straight into the asphalt. His attacks, like all plants in this world and in the world of celestials, looked very beautiful and mesmerizing. However, to the enemy, this attack looked ridiculous. Park took his time, believing that the only one who should pay for his crimes was her. Immediately, his own wooden warriors appeared behind him, and they came to life. He ordered them to attack, and they rushed at the enemy. The warriors began to grab people by the neck and squeeze them so that they could not breathe. The wooden warriors were enough to finish off the enemy and his people. Feeling threatened, she ordered the release of the dragon glasses. Drijaglots are spirits that live in a person's head, demons of headaches and mental disorders. They are very evil, but if you take good care of them, they will bring you good treasures and allow you to have children. It is said that in Korea, dragonflies are more powerful. When they were released, she ordered them to tear apart the man who killed her dear husband. He understood the threat he was facing. These monsters were very vicious, and it would be difficult to get rid of them with the help of Ents, as he called his wooden assistants. Using the fan of the nine-tailed fox was also ineffective. To the last, he didn't want to use it now, but he was lucky that he had bought a small smoking pipe from the store before. Taking it out, he took a few puffs. The active ingredient in the mandrake increased concentration by maximizing the sensory and reflex nerves. He summoned up great strength, spread his arms, and dropped something into the ground. It was a tree seedling that had crawled through the asphalt and grown into small trees. Grabbing one of them, he called the enemy freaks. These seedlings turned into a dangerous weapon in his hands, and he was not ready to spare anyone. He immediately struck the monster's back, cutting its spirit. Then he ran on to those he saw in front of him, swiftly and without any fear. In his left hand, he held the pipe from which he smoked, and in his right hand, he held a weapon. It was easy for him to fight the spirits. They fell to the ground from his attacks, but there were many of them around. She just watched from the sidelines, confident that no matter how many of these wooden creatures he created, it would be as useless as piercing a stone with a toothpick. She ordered her subordinates to summon the dragons even faster. Finally, trying to catch the flying spirit, he uttered the word and suddenly fell silent. The world around him seemed to float away. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and he did not understand what was happening. His wards also fell to the ground, choking on the black smoke that appeared. None of them could move, only barely uttering the word "save" did they tremble. Unable to hold back the blood that was flowing from her mouth, she couldn't understand what had happened to her. Park felt fine, but he noticed how she fell off that big rock. He wasn't crazy enough to fight her with swords. All of this happened because of the smoke, which was not dangerous for him because it caused a detoxification process with the help of the liver, extracting only useful components, but for others, it was a real poison. This case confirms that secondhand smoke is very harmful. It always happens to smokers. They are lying on the floor and blood is flowing from their mouths, and they can barely say "father" to the person who smoked them. And now she was lying on the floor, addressing Park and calling him "father." Suddenly, there was an explosion next to them, so strong that Puck was thrown back. The word "father" was not meant for Park at all. It was meant for the man whose head Deok was holding in his hand. He had managed to deal with him despite his strength, and there wasn't a scratch on the boy, let alone her father. Park could not believe what she was seeing, because this so-called father was the Heavenly Wolf King. His face was right in front of hers, and their eyes met in silent tension. He did not understand at all who had brought him here, and who these people were standing next to him. He kept trying to prove his importance by asking if they knew who he was, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was that he had committed an unforgivable sin in front of people. Suddenly, laughter came from the crowd, breaking the tense silence. He got to his feet, and purple energy began to appear around his body. He asked them to remember what he was about to say, because he was sure he would send them to hell, and he emphasized that he would not spare anyone. He began to absorb not only the bodies of the dead, but also the power of the living around him. It was hard to understand what was wrong with him and why they were mutilating innocent people. This is a terrible art of destruction. It is incredibly strong, and even standing in front of it, no one understood how to stop it. He thought about using the nine-tailed fox's plowman, but he wasn't sure it would work, although there was no other way out. Deok couldn't believe that the reincarnation of the Blood Buddha of the future was here in the human world, and said that the elders would certainly miss him. He asked him for a sword, and it was clear that he was confident in his abilities. When he threw the sword into his hand, he grabbed it tightly as if he had gained another power. After he thanked him, the blade passed very precisely and left a trail of incredible force. He had no right to punish someone who was a celestial, even despite his sins against innocent people. But if it became known what he had done to his subjects, Deok, as one of the Celestials, will take responsibility and carry out the necessary punishment. However, his opponent, confident in himself, having embodied the great power, continued to call his opponents freaks. But with just one precise sword stroke, nothing remained of his opponent. This blow was honed to perfection. It was here that he showed his strength, finishing off the enemy without any problems. The news reported that thanks to the quick reaction of the celestial community, all the terrorists were arrested. The identities of the dead and injured, as well as the actions of the authorities, are currently being established. He then suggested discussing the recent incident in Gwanghwamun, as the news reports showed they had dealt with the event. However, another asked about society, as he felt that they had not made any efforts. The answer was that they had managed to get information about it and said that they would understand who the real heroes were if they watched the video. Park seemed very familiar because he had become a hero a year and a half ago. He was the one who defeated the huge bird, and with that, the lady ordered the news to be turned off. Deok stood in front of the lady and apologized to her for causing a lot of trouble, as he didn't even have the qualifications to prove that he was a celestial, and it was a great sin for him to come down to the human world. Regardless of the punishment she would give him, he was ready to accept it. After everything they had done, she asked him how he dared to even look her in the eye. Park just looked her in the eye in silence, not looking away. After that, he apologized and put his head down. It was easy to see that she wasn't very angry. In fact, she was smiling and was clearly pleased that Deok had defeated the Heavenly Wolf King. At this point, she turned to him, saying, "Deok, turn around and look at me." She told him that she would not say that his actions were wrong, but she advised him to be more careful. She told Park to prepare for a disciplinary statement. After a while, he was already in the sixth garden. He was overwhelmed with strange feelings, as it seemed to him that he had not been here for a very long time, and now the time has come when he can check the find. He could not even think that someone would hide this in the statue of Sejong the Great. He didn't think this thing had any power. The statue was built in 2009, so its history is short. But after they opened it and started reading it, they were very surprised because the real name of Sejong the Great was... Mishka asked if he was called that after his death, referring to that little worldly boy from the family. The word vile was very disturbing to Puck, and he was able to assume that the boy had done something bad. But the boy explained, very emotionally, that he looked like that because of his family, who had dampened the energy of Mount Gwangssun when they founded a state there. This made him so angry that he started pulling the hair out of Park's head, but he continued to read the text written on the paper. After reading a little bit, he realized that the person who wrote it was undoubtedly King Sejong the Great. The text read, "Today, Hyang shed blood." This meant that Hyang was the real name of the son of Sejong the Great and the next ruler of the Joseon dynasty. I know what happened, and I don't have much time left, but I'm not afraid at all. However, I am disturbed by the thought of seeing my son be the first to close his eyes forever. My concern is for the people I will have to leave behind. Seeing Hyun losing weight every day because of the deity's curse is horrible. The island will be covered in blood and tears of innocent people. Long ago, there were many people who gave their lives in the name of deities. Before the era of the deity's rule over humans comes again, people who have not yet awakened their spiritual power need to gain strength and courage to resist the deities. There are runes on the distant North Island. They say that if you use them correctly, they will manifest their power. It looks like a poem with great power inside the words. After reading this, they assumed that he wanted to create power from a language system similar to the bone tongue of an oracle. They also realized that this guy was popular and respected even among celestials. If he had lived another 100 years, he might have been able to do it. If someone can read and write, then by simply learning how to activate the power of runes, that person will be able to use their power. My last wish is to not let these 28 symbols disappear, and for people who are able to achieve their goals with ease. Puck congratulated Mishka on the fact that the moment the Great King had been waiting for had arrived. He held a book with the correct pronunciation and instructions for people. He pointed his finger at the pile of firewood in front of him. Then he used his energy to lift them all up. It can't be, he thought, as he looked at this, realizing that his true attack power was due to the runes and their correct pronunciation. The book had said, "Picture the words in your mind, and they will be activated when you say them out loud." He pointed to the wood and said, "Mountains," and they instantly burst into flames. This caused him a flurry of emotions as he was very impressed. "Fire, burn, burn," he repeated, and the wood started to burn even more. He was already playing with the firewood like a child when a sleepy Mishka appeared behind him, not realizing who was setting off the fireworks. Then, Mishka opened his mouth wide and shouted loudly at Puck, "Why the hell did you decide to play with fire in broad daylight?" His impression was also strong, as he did not understand how Puck managed to bring this on. Puck just wanted to be the exception to the rule. Gwanak was worried about him and asked him to be more careful. Sometime later, after several attempts, he realized that the fire was getting bigger as he raised his tone. He wondered if he should say the word fire louder. Does it work when more people say the word? And how can I increase the power of the fire? Would I be able to create something more powerful if I used a whole sentence instead of just one word? He thought. After all, the power itself lies in the intention. This instruction on the correct pronunciation of the sounds of a document created by King Sejong during the Joseon period is called a hangul. After that, another idea came to him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "Heaven, weep and cry!" "Weep, weep," he repeated, but he could only see clouds in the sky and nothing else. He was a little embarrassed to cry at the top of his voice. Suddenly, a girl appeared next to him, standing and laughing. He was frozen in a stupor, assuming that she could see and hear all this, so he asked her how long she had been here. She began to scream, "Heaven, cry and weep," copying his voice. Then she continued, "I'm the best, the most head-banging man." But he wasn't saying that anymore, so he interrupted her and asked what she was talking about. She laughed lightly, causing Park to blush, and told him not to worry because everyone has been there. Her words sounded very reasonable, and she also looked very beautiful. We can assume that this is the reason why Park is now standing there blushing. He did not understand why she had come here and asked her. She replied that she had heard that he was participating in a battle. She also heard that he won, which means he is a fast learner. The red color did not disappear from the boy's face. But in fact, the purpose of her arrival was different. She had an argument with her aunt when she took part in the battle, decided to take a walk to prepare a little bit, and found something for Park. Later, she said that she was supposed to look after him, but it turned out that she didn't. She saw that he was doing well without her, because the garden was blooming. She threw him a wooden box and said, Here, take this. He looked at the box in his hands and could not understand what it was. He heard her explain that it was a holy scripture that she had been told to give him when Park became a member. When asked who had said that, she replied, "The wise man." Then she added, "The sage is your father." This stopped the boy's breath for a moment, and flashbacks of his life began to appear in his mind as he was a child. It seemed to him that his whole life had flashed before his eyes. His hands began to tremble, and he clutched the box tightly. Raising his voice, he asked the girl where she had met the man who called himself his father. Without understanding anything, the girl answered, "In Shenfu. A long time ago, Huanun came down from the sky and gave a stalk of wormwood and 20 cloves of garlic to a bear and a tiger who wanted to become human. The tiger ran away, but the bear fulfilled the task and turned into a man named Ungnyo. Hwanggun and Ungnyo gave birth to Tangun and created a new history of Korea. This is the most famous myth, but no one mentions that Ungnyo was not Hwanggun's legal wife. Hwanggun, who ruled the human world, grew something from a cow animal. It was the sacred tree of life in a sacred place in Korea, where the earth touches the sky. The sacred tree of life is a sacred symbol mentioned in the Tangun myth. Shenfu is a place called Shenfu. From this story, the girl realized that his father was married to Hwanggun's youngest daughter and was in Shengfu. She added that she had finished her work there and was about to return when his father approached her. He said that his son was beholden to the court. He added that trouble was coming soon. He wrote something vital, but did not tell her anything else and handed it to him to read. Now everything became clear to him, because at first he thought that his father had abandoned the family and run away. He was losing money left and right, and the burden of the accumulated debts fell on his mother and grandmother, but his father did not admit his guilt. As a result, his grandmother died, leaving this world for nothing. Park realized that his father seemed to have started a new family, but he didn't know how he was received. Ever since he became part of the Hwanggun family and received his new rights, he didn't care about his former family. The girl asked him to open the box quickly because there was a very useful thing in it. Park was also curious and eagerly opened it. Looking inside, he saw a closed mystical fan. The fan-shaped scriptures were created to seal away beasts, demons, and evil spirits. A fan with 24 blades was considered good, and a fan with more blades was considered perfect. But this fan had 72 blades, and Puck did not understand why his father gave him such a valuable thing. The girl told Puck that this fan was enough to swallow up the most evil spirit. Yes, but only if he is inclined to do so. The tone of his words changed again, and he said that he would take care of the fan. Who would ever think of giving it up, especially when there is no way to get such a valuable thing? The girl looked at his joy, which he tried to hide, and realized that he was going down a thorny path. There was also a piece of paper in the box with something written on it. He opened it and started reading, thinking it was an inscription on how to use the fan. And so, 8 hours before the start, he had this strange feeling that someone was coming. It was Deok, who was walking, brushing aside the leaves of beautiful flowers with his hand. This time, when he met him, Park called him Brother Deok. When Deok came to visit Park, he noticed that it was very beautiful. The sixth garden became even more beautiful, and he realized that only thanks to Puck would it never wither away. But the next question from Puck was why he came here. He had one request, and he asked for help in creating a flute. The story says that the flute, which eliminates all the troubles of the world and brings peace, appeared after the unification of forces. But in fact, it was created much earlier, back in the days of the great King Kwang. It was made possible by his power when even the sages could not interfere. It was the ideal human age. However, with the end of the sages' intervention, the dragons from the three seas started a war, just waiting for it. There were many victims. To stop the senseless suffering, all three powers joined forces. This is how an instrument was created that can be used against dragons, and it is called the flute. He explained that because the flute had great power, 2 restrictions were placed on it. First, it could not be taken out of the country, and second, it could not be used against the people of that country. It was entrusted with power because it was close to the strongest dragon kingdom of the Eastern Sea. Now its location is unknown. Apparently it broke down due to restrictions. Because of this, he wants to create it because he thought that Park, as the master of the sixth garden, should know what ingredients are needed for this. He added that since the celestial battle is coming soon, the borders of the flower garden will be weakened, and at that time he is going to infiltrate and get the Black Jade Bowl. However, he added, there is one if everything works out. With the appearance of the new flute, We cannot rule out suspicions on the part of Lady Yunwa that the Black Bull has been obtained, as well as the possibility of a war with the dragons who will want to destroy the flute. But Brother Deok is going to take full responsibility. One of Park's assumptions was that he saw the strike at Gwanghaman last time. Well, he's different from the other sages, Park realized. He immediately said, without hesitation, that of course he would help, because there was no question about it. Pak explained that as a man of the people, he was very happy to know that there was a man like Deok. Deok was very surprised by his words because, on the contrary, he was afraid that he would not be very helpful. Then he laughed and said, "That's what I thought." He knew that Park would help him. He walked over to him, patted him on the shoulder, and called him a good friend, and he was happy. But then they had to find a place where a tree grew that was suitable for the flute. And at that moment, Park suggested that they go. If this is the right place, even the branches or bark of the tree can be used as a valuable medicine, he said. They got closer, and what they saw in front of them was nothing short of a wow moment. The island they saw in front of them seemed to be floating in the air. It looked mesmerizing and incredible. Park didn't even know that it was possible to get here through the doors of a landfill. However, Deok explained that the pavilion itself is a combination of these spaces, and if you touch the structure of the formula, you can get to this place. But he added that it would be very difficult. A wooden horse appeared in his hand, which then turned into a live horse standing right in front of them. It was Garmy. Deok asked Park to take his hand, holding out his hand in a familiar gesture. In a moment, they were on a horse and heading straight for the island. Deok asked them to trust him, because they would not be able to touch even the tip of Puck's hair. Puck was curious about what was there, but behind him he saw different monsters, from which they quickly ran away. All of these monsters had tentacles and claws, giant 8-legged sharks and crabs. Deok explained that it was because of these monsters that he would not be able to enter the island, and Park got down from his horse. Turning around, he asked for only one thing, for Park to believe him, and in a moment he started to walk in the other direction, warning about one more thing, that there were also monsters on this island, which Park would soon see right in front of him. Substance absorbed, the active component of the mandrake, Park thought, while Brother Deok covered him. We need to finish with these monsters as soon as possible, and he reached for his pipe again. The correct pronunciation and instruction for people. The longer and more meaningful the sentence, the more their power increases. You need to act faster, even faster than anyone else. And he did just that, starting to attack the monsters after taking a few puffs. An unusual aura came from two places. It would be good for him if there was a jade bowl there, but something caught his attention that he hadn't expected to see. It was a monster of a completely different level, which easily threw Puck away with a single blow of its hand. His blows were so fast that he even cut off a piece of wood with his hand. Heavenly level, the 5th level of immortality out of 9 or even higher. Puck saw in this monster in front of him. This lizard and several others behind it made it clear that he was at a disadvantage. He had already used the mandrake, but it was still difficult to pass, so he had to reach for the fan he had. He called it a good trick. He was ready to use it as soon as the lizards ran at him, and they did so instantly. Park took the fan in his hand and waved it from behind his ear. The energy that came out of it lit up the entire forest on this island, and it was enough to deal with monsters of a much stronger rank. Immediately after these lizards left, an even stronger monster appeared. The eye of this monster was filled with coldness and ruthlessness. It was a giant bear that let out a loud roar that echoed throughout the island. Even far behind him, he stepped on the lizard with his foot, not noticing it under his feet. With one kick after another, the lizards flew in different directions. Mishka and Puck couldn't understand what was happening, but he was quickly dealing with the lizards. His blows were so hard that it was impossible to resist them. Mishka only asked Puck to wave the fan even more. As he fought back, Puck realized that Deok was enjoying his strength, even if he didn't want to admit it. Puck also realized that he was not called the Mountain Fire God for nothing. This is also not his true image, but an evil that irritates the great mountain among the mountain spirits. Mount Golanak has the shape of a mountain peak that looks like fire, making it a volcano. Parents believe that fires would easily break out in the capital overlooking this mountain. To extinguish the fire, a pond was dug on the top of the mountain and a bronze statue of Hetu was installed. For hundreds of years, he had been suppressing the energy of Mount Gwanak. As soon as Mishka saw the lizards running away, he, very angry, ran after them. But it was clear that there was nothing strange in the fact that they were running to where they felt strong energy. Besides, this black jade bowl must be absorbing most of the island's nutrients because all the plants on this island grow very well. Park sat on a tree branch and watched where all the lizards were running to. It was a giant shell that they all ran up to and ran inside. They decided that there was nothing unusual inside that they could regret, and so they decided to run inside. Pak took out his fan and waved it again, and immediately the bear became even bigger. Its eyes were filled with energy, but they were not the eyes of a bear, but the eyes of someone else. The appearance of this creature made him nervous and wondered what was going on. In a panic, Mishka shouted to Puck what he was doing and asked him to get him out of there quickly. By hitting the ground with his hands, Puck forced the plants to save Mishka. Feeling safe, Mishka sat on Puck's shoulder and saw the one who had been acting as fertilizer on the island. This meant that this het puppy was right here. It is not uncommon to meet someone who has the Divine Beasts account and is an intermediary. Mr. Lee also raised one of them. This is Hedda. He is now an adult, and it is very interesting to know if this puppy is this big. How many are here and how many have grown up? This little guy is about 200 years old, and as far as you can see, he's doing his best to get out of the thicket. He needs to grow and explore the world. At this age, seeing that he can't even resist the machinery, we can conclude that he hasn't learned the basics. Picking up the fan again, Park told Mishka that everything would be fine. After that, he waved his fan again, saying that everything would be fine. A giant bear was drawn on the eyelashes chasing the puppy. Giant plants began to grow on the ground in the form of healthy cones. That's all they needed. He suggested they gather everything they could. Gather everything you can and then just leave, he said. What he saw in front of him, these plants, made him very happy and satisfied. The puppy was already running away from Mishka. After a while, the boy's foot stepped over the threshold. Deok was waiting for him, but for some reason blood was flowing from under his coat. At first glance, Puck thought he was just choking. The guy asked him not to take care of him and explained that after resting in a quiet place, he would be able to recover. But how long he would fight it? That was the question. Then he handed Puck a purple ball and asked him to take it. He explained that it was the payment that Park deserved for what he had done, because this garden was protected by twin dragons bound together. He added that he would have liked to give both balls back, but it so happened that he was only able to get the ball from one. He explained that there was no need to make such a face because it was more than a fair reward. Deok's reckoning does not end there. If he survives the fight for the championship and creates a new flute and gives it to the people, Lady Yunwa will find out about it, and it will be impossible to avoid her wrath. After that, they moved on, and we can conclude that Deok is very strong as a person and as a sage. Puck is ready to become strong enough to call him his older brother with confidence. Pak suggested that Seongbei go to Ponmachukso, but he explained that as a mountain god, he had to maintain his reputation and thought he would be sharpened in some kind of tool. This is not normal, but the guy offered him a few jars of honey, and he immediately agreed. "Good afternoon, dear viewers," said a voice that echoed around. The voice continued. "I am now on the island of Tokdo in the Eastern Sea, where a battle for supremacy is taking place. The Battle of the True Celestials is impressive even before the battle begins. Unlike previous tournaments, this is a competition where the winners face the opposite team. There are also voices of concern about whether this face will be disadvantageous to the winner, because everyone is competing on different levels." Park listened to this and looked at the guy who didn't seem to be seriously injured. They continued to announce that before the competition began, representatives of sages from each country would send congratulatory messages to the Dragon King of the East Sea. The girl twirled her witness in her hands and held it up, saying that with this message they hope that the Dragon King will understand what it means to hold the competition in the sea, in the domain of the Dragon King. They say it means making a sacrifice in return. After that, work began on temporarily filling the sea for the battle. She asked everyone to see how the two islands became hotter in the blink of an eye. She just waved her hands and the water became more. This is the power of the Celestials. Foreign observers of the Celestials appeared on the covered platform. They are here for a fair judgment. It is said that along with the inspection, each representative invited a high-ranking official to fulfill their conditions. One of them said, "I, as the one who speaks for Shiva, will judge fairly with all the honor I have assumed. I will do so until the winner is decided, and I swear that I will protect the wealth of Mrs. Yuva with my life." They both swore and took out the chest, promising to protect the 7 blades with their lives. Suddenly, energy began to bubble up in Park's bag on his belt. He jumped up and looked at it, not understanding what the resonance was. He realized that he was reacting to the 7 blades. The hilt was a 7-pointed sword. It became clear after the reaction. The blade also began to fill with energy and glow blue. It began to fly in front of the man. And on his back he had a sword that also began to glow. The energy coming out of it was blue. He had to do something, so he took his sword from behind his back and sharpened the blade that was in the box. He asked everyone's forgiveness as he held the tip of his blade and explained that this little boy really wanted to win. Sometimes when they meet our opponents, he reacts quite violently. He added that despite the fact that the sword had no owner, it showed a very violent reaction. He apologized for interrupting the event. Yuhua noticed that if this is a sword that can handle the divine power of a fencer, his level of spirit is clearly not low. Park simply said the words, "broken sword," in his head. He looked and realized that this was the man, a broken sword, so to speak, a destroyer of weapons. This nickname was given to him because his grip is so strong that there is no sword that can withstand and not break. Valhalla. Even among Valhalla's ancestors, he is the owner of a human skeleton with so much fighting power that its owners can be counted on the fingers of one hand. His name is Beowulf. If it were not for Beowulf's position now, the hilt of the 7 swords would have jumped out of the treasure box. For that matter, the reason for that is probably because Park was the one who had the hilt of the 7 swords. An announcement is made. Lian goes first and an energy layer is formed. Inside this layer they stand. The celestial first round corresponds to the 5th level of power, and there are 9 in total. Park, clenching his fists, just wishes his master good luck. Next to him, the words are heard. What a pity. The girl turned to Park and asked him again, "Isn't that right?" Her name was Guo. She was a member of the Guo family that Park had met when he was promoted to the heavenly level. He didn't know what she was talking about, but she asked him to watch to see for himself and added that she hated to explain such obvious things. Strangely enough, he decided to look up there. It was a kamaitachi, a Japanese yokai, in the shape of a weasel with sickle-shaped front paws. They flew like lightning at the enemy, who was standing and holding a stick. He swung his stick several times. He was able to easily repel the enemy's attack, which made him gnash his teeth. She only tried to resume her attack. It ended in a splatter of blood and nothing more. In terms of combat flair and ability, Lee is ahead of his Japanese rivals, but that Japanese celestial has dramatically increased in power. Park realized that this was an instrument of the Dharma. The girl asked him, "Have you just realized this now?" Initially, the teacher was a wanderer who disappeared from time to time but always returned. She asked why he took on a student who did not have a single Dharma instrument. She added that if he did not get rid of him, the next attacker would be Chawol's brother, who was armed with Dharma tools. The Battle of Tokto is also a place to test the skills of royal Japanese celestials, a battle watched by the people of the world. The hidden purpose of this competition was to make an active performance worthy of their memory. Lady Yunwa wanted to revive the dignity of the Guo family for the people of the world and show the image of the clan defeating the Japanese ancestors at Tokto. From the very beginning, Li was only an assistant. Looking ahead, he saw something very impressive. The stick hit the ground again. Mr. Li had not yet given up. Even though he was facing a serious opponent, his legs could barely stand. He found the strength to continue. Li Ying almost lost consciousness after the attack, but he managed to hold on. His condition seemed very serious, perhaps due to the serious wound he received from Kamaitachi. But his gaze remained very confident. Does this mean that the Korean Celestial has lost the battle? In any case, he needs to gather his strength. Shouting, "You can't just lose!" He jumped into the air with his stick. His opponent, using his weapon, realized that it was useless for him to flounder. The stick disappeared from his hands, and he realized that the situation had become even worse because his hands were empty. At that moment, he felt a severe pain that knocked his breath away. Drops of blood began to drip from his mouth onto the ground right next to his feet. Bleeding, he sat down on one knee, helpless. He looked at the enemy in front of him, and his face was even more bloody. Grabbing his stick, he leaned it on the ground and then lost consciousness. Everyone was told that Japan had won the first match. There were shouts. "Stretchers! Hurry up and get a first aid kit!" Park clenched his fists as he sat in the stands. Park realized that the crowd was at peace with him. The girl asked him if he shouldn't be happy because this would give him a stage on which to make himself stand out even more. She added that this would only happen if he could win. She asked him to lose beautifully and quickly, because that way she would be able to stand out. In response, the guy just kept silent. Then he told her that he would try his best, but that she would not be able to stand out. All this would happen because he was going to be the winner. An announcement is made. Park Hanil is next. He is known for killing Lady Yunwa's favorite descendant. Everyone is very interested in what he will show them. The Japanese man looks at him and says, "What, this nincompoop again?" He shouted to everyone that everyone had already seen what he was capable of. His monsters are flying around him again, showing their long quills. He promised Puck that he could feed his monsters with his flesh, As he spoke and threatened, Puck ran up to him without batting an eye and punched him right in the face. Deok stood there, holding his breath, watching what was happening. All the cameramen could not believe what they were seeing either. What just happened? Mr. Park Hanil won by an impossible margin. She sat in the stands and screamed, "You're crazy!" because there was a possibility that he would faint from lack of blood. She was outraged that he did not value his life at all. But Deok told the girl that it was a very brave and effective decision. Throwing himself under attack was brave and effective, but to this girl it seemed crazy. Besides, she didn't understand how the guy knew about the fast movement technique. Deoku really didn't want to explain, but he explained that Master Hyunyul is like a bottomless bowl when it comes to learning skills. The simulators took the active ingredient of purple acid, calcium, and vitamin D, which increased cell viability and blood production. Iron and purple acid attenuated bleeding. But with this, he can only pretend that everything is fine, because the bleeding has not been completely stopped. And then a question comes over the loudspeaker. How long can Park take the blows? He needs to learn how to attack back. He waited for a few minutes. Then he reached for the cards he had up his sleeve. He warned him that he was not that easy and threw the cards in Park's direction. A moment later, giant samurai appeared behind him, but they were puppets. They were wearing a protective amulet to avoid close combat. Then it was necessary to act decisively, and Park clenched his fists to the limit. She controlled the puppets with cards, each of which gave new commands. He wondered if she planned to use this trick again.
He thought she had some strengths, but it's... At this rate, Park is winning.
Her face changes. She glances back, uneasy. She can't understand what's happening, because her puppets are suffering from wooden monsters. It seems that Park has also summoned his puppet. After that, he suggests ending everything according to Korean custom. The art of chanting is a style of Korean writing that later evolved into Hangul, marked by dots instead of dashes and vowels. He then suggests singing a battle march. Let's sing a battle march, sharp pain and suffocating fear. Until our last breath we will stand, he said. But the audience and cameramen did not understand why he was suddenly singing a march. Suddenly, a new energy appeared around him, and he continued to sing. I'm afraid that if I get weak, we'll just lose. We are doing our best to keep the country from falling, swallowing medicine like water. The wooden monsters broke the puppets one by one. The screams grew louder,